Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga. Chapter 1912. Evil Dragon Appears. Zero Wing City, Candlelight Trading Firm. When the system had announced the Otherworld Gate's activation, a large number of Star Moon Kingdom's independent players had flooded Zero Wing City. This also increased the number of players visiting the city's Candlelight Trading Firm. Meanwhile, 3 cloaked players enjoyed a meal and admired the populated street from the second floor of an open-air restaurant opposite of the trading firm. If one used a high-ranking identification skill on these 3, they would definitely be surprised. None of these players were human. Among the 3, one was a beautiful female half-elf, one was a female catkin with cat ears and tail, and one was a male tigerkin with a powerful, robust body. All 3 were members of the Ninth Heaven Guild, with the female half-elf being Melody, Ninth Heaven's guild leader. Big Sis Melody, this city is so prosperous, even more so than our forest city. I can see more than 100 Tier 2 experts from here, the catkin, Scarlet Heart, said, watching the sea of players downstairs with a shocked expression. Indeed. I never thought that a kingdom's guild city could develop to this extent. Melody was similarly surprised by the number of Tier 2 experts roaming the street below. Before coming to Star Moon Kingdom, she had specifically asked Thoughtful Rain about Zero Wing's current state of affairs. However, she couldn't believe Thoughtful Rain's reply. Thoughtful Rain had mentioned that Zero Wing City's player population had already reached 5 million, and experts were a common sight in the city. Moreover, Zero Wing City had many rare items for sale. Based on these descriptions, Zero Wing City sounded no less successful than Forest City. How could that possibly be true? However, when she had arrived in the city, she discovered that it was far more well-off than Thoughtful Rain had described. In Zero Wing City, expert players were as common as ordinary players, and plenty of Tier 2 experts wandered the city streets. Tier 2 experts were very rare, even in Forest City. Even Ninth Heaven, which was almost as powerful as a first-rate guild, had only nurtured around 30 Tier 2 experts thus far. However, the number of Tier 2 experts on the street outside of the restaurant already outnumbered Ninth Heaven's. If even Zero Wing City was so popular, she couldn't imagine how strong Zero Wing had already become. Guild leader, although Zero Wing is stronger than we expected, I doubt it can help our guild. Our current opponent is the legendary Death God Workshop. The Death God Workshop has even provoked super guilds before, and none of them could do anything about it. Closing an eye to the workshop's transgressions, the tigerkin named One-Arm Rashomon said worriedly. On the other hand, the Setting Sun Guild is more reliable. Moreover, guild leader, your family has a close relationship with Setting Sun's guild leader. Whether it is for profit or that relationship, Setting Sun will go all out to help our guild. In addition, the Death God Workshop would, more or less, fear of the strength of a recently promoted super first-rate guild like Setting Sun and might give up on targeting us. Stop. While Setting Sun might be stronger than Zero Wing, Setting Sun's condition requires Ninth Heaven to become its subordinate. I will never agree to that, even if I have to fight the Death God Workshop to the death. Melody's voice was frosty. Her guild had gone to great lengths to complete the high-ranked quest in the Flame Demon's Valley and acquired a precious treasure. However, an information leak had informed the Death God Workshop of their new acquisition, and the workshop had attacked Ninth Heaven to steal the treasure. The Death God Workshop was not a guild. It was an organized adventurer team. Not only were its movements erratic, but the adventurer team also had its fair share of experts. Moreover, as an adventurer team, the Death God Workshop did not have a permanent base of operations. But Ninth Heaven was different. The guild had already grown considerably large and secured a permanent base of operations. One could easily imagine the outcome of a struggle between the two organizations. The Death God Workshop always had the initiative in battle. Moreover, the Death God Workshop also had experts that could even contend with Super Guild's peak experts. The workshop's members had used guerrilla tactics against Ninth Heaven's players, and the guild had been powerless to stop them. Big Sis Melody. It's almost time. Rain and Blue should have returned to Zero Wing's residence by now, Scarlet Heart said as she checked the time. All right, let's go. Taking a look herself, Melody noticed that it was nearly time to meet with Thoughtful Rain. She immediately stood to leave the restaurant. Meanwhile, Dark Sickle stood on a street corner not far from the Candlelight Trading Firm. He quietly stalked the 2 unbounded members. The 2 members of the adventurer team were utterly unaware of their stalker. This should be enough, people. I should be able to cause quite a commotion. Dark Sickle, who wore a black cloak and only had his eyes exposed, licked his lips in anticipation as he observed his surroundings. The task Wind Hunter had given him was simple. Kill the adventurer team members who had come to join Zero Wing, and kill as many bystanders as possible. This would send a message to every player in Star Moon Kingdom, teaching them the consequences of joining Zero Wing and proving that they weren't safe even in a guild city protected by NPC soldiers. If he succeeded, not only would the various adventurer teams receive the warning, but all players would realize that Zero Wing City was dangerous, and they could lose their lives at any given moment. This would cripple Zero Wing City's popularity. In the past, he might have feared the NPC soldiers patrolling the city streets, but now that he could transform into an evil dragon, not even level 80, Tier 3 NPCs could pose a threat, much less level 80, Tier 2 NPC soldiers. All he needed to worry about was the kingdom's army. After all, the NPCs in the kingdom's army were all above level 100. Killing him would be a piece of cake for them. However, he had a Tier 3 instantaneous movement magic scroll on him. If the kingdom's army arrived before he escaped, he could still leave the area. Attack! Wind Hunter, who watched the two unbounded members from afar, commanded Dark Sickle through their party chat. Hearing this, Dark Sickle removed a crimson crystal from his bag and shattered it. As the crimson crystal shattered, energy flowed into Dark Sickle's body. In the next moment, the magic circuits drawn on his skin disintegrated as if some seal had been removed. Once the magic circuits had disintegrated, Dark Sickle howled as his muscles rapidly expanded, his sudden growth tearing his black cloak to shreds. When passers-by saw Dark Sickle's growing form, they were dumbfounded. Before these players could react, Dark Sickle transformed into a 10-meter-tall evil dragon. Roar! After completing his transformation, Dark Sickle released a deafening roar, echoing throughout the city's central district. A dragon? What's going on? Why has a dragon suddenly appeared? The players on the street panicked when they saw the evil dragon. They could feel the threat of death emanating from the creature. With a flap of his newly grown wings, Dark Sickle shot into the air above the two unbounded players. Unbounded adventurer team, since you dare attempt to join Zero Wing, you will suffer the consequences. Dark Sickle shouted before swiping at the swordsman and berserker with a claw. Die! Both the scholarly berserker and the swordsman youth felt powerless against the massive, incoming claw. They had only caught a glimpse of the claw's afterimage, and the power it contained was so great that space around it had become unstable. However, just as the dragon claw was about to strike the two players, everyone saw a blue flash before an agonized cry filled the air. The evil dragon flew over a dozen yards backward before crashing heavily into the ground, the impact leaving a crater under the creature. This outcome dumbfounded the surrounding players once more. Chapter 1913 Commotion at Zero Wing on the crowded street. When the two unbounded members saw the evil dragon crash into the ground some distance away, they were dazed for a short moment, failing to process what had just happened. What's going on? We didn't die? Stubborn Bone, Unbounded's commander, stared at the small crater a little over a dozen yards away from him and the evil dragon lying in it with a befuddled expression. A second ago, he had heard the evil dragon state its intent to kill him and his companion. When the creature's claw attack had descended on them, he had known their deaths were sealed. The attack had been too fast for either of them to keep up with, much less block or dodge. Yet, after a bright blue flash, the mighty evil dragon had vanished, crashing into the ground some distance away. Once his mind began to work again, Stubborn Bone spun towards the origin of the blue flash, discovering a cloaked player wielding a blue longsword who was slowly walking towards the evil dragon. Was it him? Stubborn Bone stared at the cloaked player in disbelief. He found it truly hard to believe that an attack from a one-handed sword could send such a powerful and fast evil dragon flying. Crap! What's going on? Why is a dragon in the city? That's not right. Look at the marker above the dragon's head. That's a player's marker. That dragon is a player. I think I heard the dragon say that it was going to kill the adventurer teams that try to join Zero Wing. By the looks of it, the dragon seems to have some kind of grudge with Zero Wing. But what happened just now? I only saw the dragon begin its rampage, and before I realized it, the creature had been thrown. The players on the street couldn't help but discuss Dark Sickle's sudden attack. The situation confused them. When the various major powers' upper echelons on the street saw the gigantic evil dragon, Realization dawned on them. Isn't that the evil god's temple's evil dragon? Ha ha ha. This is interesting. It seems the evil god's temple can no longer sit still after watching Zero Wing City's rapid development. I wonder how Zero Wing will deal with this problem? This evil dragon is clearly much stronger than the ones over at the Dark Witch's Tower. Even the NPC soldiers should be powerless against it. Good. Keep making trouble. Once Zero Wing City's fame is ruined, our guilds will have a better chance of luring the Witch's Hills players later. The various guild upper echelons watched Dark Sickle, who stood back up and seemed mostly unharmed, with anticipation. They hoped that Dark Sickle would cause a large enough commotion in the city that they could take advantage of, attracting more players to the guild towns they would build in the near future. Who are you? You dare to make an enemy of the evil god's temple? As Dark Sickle regained his footing, he glared at the cloaked man wielding the blue long sword, his voice echoing throughout the central district as he spoke. Zero Wing's black flame. Xueqi said, chuckling as he took off his black cloak. Satisfied. You. How? Dark Sickle's anger vanished when he saw Xueqi, and he was abruptly alert. When the spectators saw Xueqi's appearance, they could not help but gape. What? It's the Sword King. Lucky. I never thought I would get to meet the legendary Black Flame on my first visit to Zero Wing City. Amazing. I can boast about this when I meet up with my friends later. After a moment of silence, the crowd erupted into a round of cheers. Not only was Black Flame's name known by all in Star Moon Kingdom, but many players also revered him to a fanatical degree. This swordsman had been responsible for many miracles in the kingdom, and a large portion of players trying to join Zero Wing did so because of his presence in the guild. Why wouldn't they be excited now that he had shown up in Zero Wing City? Damn it, why is Black Flame here? When the various guild upper echelons saw Xueqi, their expressions darkened. They knew what kind of strength Black Flame possessed. When the man went all out, he could even stand toe-to-toe with a mythic monster for a short time. With Black Flame here, the evil dragon would likely fail to cause any trouble in Zero Wing City. Black Flame. Stubborn Bone was dazed once more as Xueqi walked past him. Amazing! As expected of the Sword King. Just the mention of his name is enough to make that dragon panic. The swordsman youth beside Stubborn Bone was ecstatic to see Xueqi, his eyes practically sparkling. After this turn of events, he was even more resolved to join Zero Wing. Meanwhile, when Melody's group of three, who had just stepped out of the open-air restaurant opposite of the candlelight trading firm, saw this scene, they could not help but reveal astonished expressions. What's going on? Why are these people so excited? Scarlet Heart muttered strangely. Although Xueqi's attack had been stunning, it hadn't been impressive enough to warrant such a crazed reaction from the crowd. After all, the evil dragon wasn't even injured. It had merely lost a few tens of thousands of HP. To the evil dragon, who had over 30 million HP, the damage was nothing. It's probably because of Black Flame's fame in Star Moon Kingdom, Melody deduced. She, too, was confused by the spectators' reactions. Although some players were very famous, this was the first time she had seen such an exaggerated reaction over an expert player. In fact, when Xueqi revealed himself, the evil dragon, which had bubbled with rage a moment ago, trembled in fear. Are you guys not from Star Moon Kingdom or the neighboring kingdoms? A level 56, Tier 1 assassin, who had overheard Melody and Scarlet Heart's conversation, asked. We came from somewhere far away. Melody nodded, confirming the assassin's assumption. So that's the case. I guess it's normal that you don't understand the situation. Black Flame is our kingdom's publicly acknowledged #1 expert. With his strength alone, he caused an army of 10,000 to freeze in fear. There are rumors that he's actually a humanoid monster or NPC. He even soloed and overpowered a mythic monster in the Or Empire. Dealing with Great Lord-ranked monsters is a piece of cake for him, the assassin explained with a reverential look. Soloing a mythic monster? And he overpowered it? How? One-arm Rashomon stated in amazement. Mythic monsters were still invincible to players at this stage of the game. Even peak Tier 2 MTs had an extremely difficult time surviving against mythic monsters, not to mention overpowering one. So, it's guild leader Black Flame. The evil god's temple has a grudge against these two. I am simply here to teach them a lesson. This matter does not concern Zero Wing. Once I finish these two off, I'll leave the city. However, if you try to stop me, don't blame me for causing a scene. Dark Sickle said, grinning once he had calmed down. His previous fear had simply been due to Black Flame's name. After all, the man was a living legend. He had even slain 2 evil dragon experts at the Dark Witch's Tower. It was only natural for him to be afraid. However, when he gave the matter a little more thought, he remembered that he was much stronger than the 2 evil dragons Xueqi had faced. Although he was only at the Tier 3 archaic species standard, he had gained a 5-level boost after transforming. Hence, he was now a level 62, Tier 3 archaic species. To monsters, an additional 5 levels was a massive attribute boost. With such an advantage, he had no reason to fear Black Flamulp. Moreover, with his combat standard, not even a Tier 4 NPC could stop him quickly if he wanted to cause a ruckus in Zero Wing City, much less a Tier 2 player. Sure. Give it a try if you dare. Xueqi growled softly. Chapter 1914. Elemental Oppression. When Xueqi fell silent, the crowd couldn't help but grow nervous. They hadn't expected Xueqi to ignore Dark Sickle's threat. The evil dragon was a level 62, Tier 3 archaic species. If Dark Sickle truly intended to cause trouble, they had no doubt that they'd be the first to get dragged into the mess. Even if the city's NPC soldiers arrived to deal with this player, it wouldn't stop Dark Sickle from slaughtering the spectators. Unlike monsters, players couldn't be aggroed. Dark Sickle could simply ignore the NPCs and massacre players as he wished. With how powerful the evil dragon's attacks were, most players would die in one hit. Only those with invulnerability skills might survive. They were merely bystanders. It was unreasonable for them to get dragged into this. When Dark Sickle heard Xueqi's response, he was stunned. He hadn't expected that. Gah! You forced my hand. Dark Sickle bellowed as he glared at Xueqi. Let me see whether or not you are worthy of your title as the Sword King. Dark Sickle flapped his wings, his massive body transforming into a gale that swept toward Xueqi. The windstorm was so powerful that it blew the surrounding players off their feet. Even the Tier 2 players barely kept their footing. It took only an instant for Dark Sickle to cross the 20 yards between him and Xueqi. As he arrived before the swordsman, he swung his claw at the man. As Stubborn Bone, who stood behind Xueqi, felt the attack's intense pressure, he felt his body grow heavy. However, despite the approaching attack, Xueqi made no attempt to dodge. Instead, his body lit with a golden light as he countered the attack with a swing of Killing Ray. Boom! With the sound of an explosion, the marble under Xueqi's feet cracked. As the powerful storm subsided, and everyone could reopen their eyes, the unbelievable scene before them left them astounded. Xueqi's long sword had actually stopped the evil dragon's gigantic claw. He blocked it. Everyone was shocked when they saw that Xueqi had only taken a few steps back after receiving the attack. Everyone had a very clear understanding of the evil dragon's strength. Moreover, the creature was ridiculously fast. Current players had no hope against this evil dragon. Yet, Xueqi had stopped its attack. So what if you blocked a casual strike? I wonder how long you can keep it up. Dark Sickle sneered. Although Xueqi had blocked his attack, he knew that both his strength and speed were superior to Xueqi's. Meanwhile, Xueqi's berserk skill had a limited duration, and he hadn't even gotten serious yet. Dark Sickle proceeded to brandish his claws, sending countless afterimages flying at Xueqi. When the crowd saw the innumerable afterimages, they were momentarily stunned. If they were in Xueqi's position, they wouldn't have any way to nullify the attack. They had never thought that a player-controlled monster would be so horrifically powerful. Unlike players, monsters couldn't fully exhibit their combat power, and they couldn't execute rapid chain attacks, which was why players had a chance of defeating them. But as these players watched the evil dragon's attacks, they were overcome with despair, instinctively giving up on any form of resistance. Finally getting serious? Xueqi wasn't particularly surprised to see the approaching afterimages. Immediately, he unsheathed the abyssal blade and brandished both swords. Purgatory Pentaslash. Shadow Blade. One sword light after another flew from Xueqi's hands and clashed with the claw afterimages, sparks and sounds of explosions filling the air. The exchanges between Xuefeng and Dark Sickle were so fast that not even the surrounding Tier 2 experts could discern what was happening. They could only hear the booms as a strong wind pushed against them. Too strong. Black Flame can actually fight that powerful evil dragon to a standstill? Is he really a player? An indescribable shock filled the spectators as they watched the showdown between a human and a dragon. As for Dark Sickle, the more he fought, the more frightened he became. He clearly had the advantage when it came to strength and speed, yet Xuefeng's swords always deflected his attacks as the swordsman employed an impeccable defense and only lost a small amount of HP from each clash. Even after more than 10 seconds, Xuefeng hadn't even lost 10% of his HP. Big Sis Melody, Black Flame is ridiculously strong. He can actually face off against a player with the strength of a Tier 3 archaic species. If Black Flame is willing to help us, we might be able to resolve the matter with the Death God workshop. She was breathless, yet Xuefeng's breathing remained steady despite such an intense battle. Black Flame is quite powerful, but at the end of the day, he's still using a berserk skill. He can't keep this up for long. Once his skill's duration is over, he won't be able to stop the evil dragon. We should leave quickly, one Rashomon said worriedly. There's no need to be afraid. We're in a guild city. There are plenty of NPC soldiers nearby. That evil dragon can't keep fighting for long either, Melody said as she turned to look at Zero Wing City's NPC soldiers, who had just arrived. The first NPC soldiers to arrive were a 20-man patrol squad, and every soldier was a level 80, Tier 2 NPC. Upon arriving, the NPCs attacked Dark Sickle without hesitation. As these Tier 2 NPCs received an attribute boost from the city's core magic array, their strength could rival great lords of the same level. Due to the NPC soldiers' participation, Xuefeng's situation turned for the better. One of the Tier 2 cleric NPCs immediately cast Recovery on Xuefeng, granting him an hot buff. Meanwhile, several MTs carrying shields quickly formed a defensive wall before Xuefeng, severely hindering the evil dragon's attacks, while several ranged NPCs bombarded Dark Sickle with attacks, depleting the evil dragon's HP by tens of thousands. Although Dark Sickle still had the upper hand, it was only a matter of time before his HP was whittled down to nothing. Black Flame, I have underestimated you, but you still can't stop me if I target other players. When Dark Sickle saw the growing NPC crowd around him, he realized that continuing his fight with Xuefeng would be detrimental. He then shifted his gaze to Unbounded's two members, sneering as he said, "I'll show you the price of angering me." After saying so, Dark Sickle flapped his wings and dashed towards Stubborn Bone and the swordsman youth. Since his strength and speed were so much greater than Xuefeng and the Tier 2 NPC soldiers, it only took him a second to shake them off and reach the Unbounded duo. Elemental Oppression! Xuefeng shouted. Suddenly, a beam of light shot up from each of the 4 towers of elements, located in Zero Wing City's 4 corners. A colossal magic array enveloped the city from above, freezing space within the city's walls. Every player in the city felt their bodies become indescribably heavy. As for Dark Sickle, it felt as if his body had been submerged in a pool of water. Now, it took a lot more effort to move his claws, decreasing his attack speed by more than 50%. After activating Elemental Oppression, Xuefeng used Instant Strike to appear before Dark Sickle. He then swung Killing Ray at the evil dragon's descending claw. Pang! After repelling the attack, Xuefeng thrust the abyssal blade towards Dark Sickle. Although the evil dragon saw the attack and tried to intercept it with his other claw, he was simply too slow to keep up with Xuefeng's strike. Suddenly, Dark Sickle felt pain in his chest before his body was thrown backward, the attack's outcome surprising him. Chapter 1915, Might of the 4 Towers of Elements, he sent the dragon flying. The crowd stared in shock as Xuefeng threw the evil dragon backward by over a dozen yards. A moment ago, Xuefeng had clearly been at a disadvantage, yet he had just sent this intruder flying. Moreover, he had done so with a normal attack. Damn it! Why does this city have such a powerful domain magic array? Dark Sickle glared at the magic barrier above the city with a grim expression. Due to this magic array, his mobility had been reduced by at least half. Moreover, his basic attributes had decreased by as much as 40%. This drop in his performance was the reason that Xuefeng had succeeded in throwing him so far with a simple normal attack. A domain magic array. So, this is Zero Wing City's trump card? Although the magic array's powerful suppression only targeted Dark Sickle, the various guild upper echelons realized what had happened. The previous exchange's unexpected outcome hadn't been a result of Xueqi's strength. Rather, it had been because the magic array, which had abruptly appeared above the city, had drastically weakened Dark Sickle. The magic array must be particularly powerful since an ordinary array wouldn't be enough to suppress a Tier 3 archaic species to this extent. After Xueqi repulsed Dark Sickle, the 20 NPC soldiers moved to surround him. They had no problem suppressing Dark Sickle now, dealing over -100,000 damage with each attack. No matter how much Dark Sickle struggled, he couldn't break free from the NPC's encirclement. He couldn't even get close to any of the surrounding players, much less kill them. How is this possible? Wind Hunter, who watched from a safe distance, frowned. He hadn't expected Zero Wing City to possess such powerful defenses. Not only did the city possess a defensive magic array, but it was also a domain magic array. He had used a precious disguise tool to sneak Dark Sickle into the city, yet his efforts had gone to waste. Now, Dark Sickle couldn't even manage to kill a single ordinary player, much less the 2 unbounded members. If this battle continued, Dark Sickle would be the only player to die. Boss Wind, more NPCs are gathering to my location. I can't hold on at this rate. If I'm going to cause any damage to Zero Wing City, I'm afraid that I'll have to use that move. Dark Sickle contacted Wind Hunter while defending himself against the NPC soldiers. His evil dragonification was far different from the first attempts. Not only had it granted him a level boost, but he could also use an overtier spell while in his evil dragon form. However, this overtier spell was still one of the evil god's temple's secrets. He couldn't reveal it to the public unless absolutely necessary. Yet, he could only deal a significant blow to Zero Wing City if he used this overtier spell now. The Tier 3 instantaneous movement magic scroll he had prepared was his only other option of escape. After giving the matter some thought, Wind Hunter gnashed his teeth and reluctantly agreed. Use it. Although this will expose the evil dragon's true strength earlier than planned, it is better than leaving the city without accomplishing anything. Dust Edge had warned him that the evil dragonification process was still incomplete, and as a result, casting its overtier spell would require a heavy price. If Dark Sickle used the overtier spell now, it might even cancel his evil dragonification. But he couldn't care less right now. If they escaped without accomplishing anything in Zero Wing City, the evil god's temple would be a laughingstock, and Zero Wing would become even more famous. Once he had permission to use the overtier spell, Dark Sickle's worries vanished. Now, he was overcome with mad excitement. Black Flame, I'll show you the true price of defying me. Dark Sickle snarled as he glared at Xueqi, ignoring the surrounding NPC's attacks. Suddenly, the evil energy around his body skyrocketed, and his aura intensified. 12 pitch-black magic arrays manifested around Dark Sickle, each opening a hole in space as a flood of evil energy poured out and into Dark Sickle's draconic form. A ball of black light then formed before the evil dragon, gradually expanding. Tier 4 Overtier Spell. Evil Energy Burst. When cast, this spell would absorb evil energy from other planes and deal devastating damage to a 300-yard radius. With how crowded Zero Wing City's central district currently was, such an AoE would devour several thousand players. Crap! That evil dragon is trying to use a large-scale destruction spell. We need to get out of here. Melody's expression darkened as destructive energy filled Dark Sickle's surroundings. All of the spectating magical class players could feel the large-scale destruction spell Dark Sickle was preparing to cast. They immediately turned and tried to flee. Running. Dark Sickle sneered at the fleeing players. I can collect all the energy I need in 2 more seconds. Do you think you can run 300 yards that quickly? Hearing Dark Sickle's taunt, the fleeing players despaired. Damned lunatic! We're only visiting Zero Wing City, yet you're attacking us too. Evil God's Temple. Just you wait. I won't let you get away with this. The spectating players realized that escape was impossible. Aside from the NPCs and players with invulnerability skills, all of these players would likely die. Ha ha ha. Excellent. The Evil God's Temple has done a good job this time. I can't wait to see who would dare develop in Zero Wing City after today. The Evil God's Temple is ruthless, attacking Zero Wing City so soon after Zero Wing attacked Ancient Rock City. It seems Zero Wing will have a hard time developing further. The various guild upper echelons watching from a distance laughed as Dark Sickle prepared his large-scale destruction spell. Not only had the evil god's temple managed to sneak an evil dragon into Zero Wing City, but the evil dragon in question could also cast a large-scale destruction spell. After this, no player would feel safe visiting Zero Wing City in the future. Meanwhile, this situation would grant their guilds an opportunity to develop in the Witch's Hill. Die! Dark Sickle bellowed, madness filling his eyes as he glared at Xueqi, who stood unmoving before the two unbounded members. Suddenly, the pitch-black light ball before the evil dragon rapidly expanded. Like a black hole that devoured everything, the light ball all in its path with evil energy. Even elemental suppression is useless? A cold glint flashed in Xueqi's eyes as he stared at the expanding ball of light. What about this then? Saying so, Xueqi activated the 4 Towers of Element's second killing move. Tier 4 Curse. Elemental Burst. The 4 Towers of Elements were one of God's domain's peak defensive structures. Even after 10 years in the game, the various super guilds had continued to protect their cities with the 4 Towers of Elements due to their 3 killing moves. Elemental Suppression, a domain magic array that drastically weakened enemies' combat powers, both in and outside of the city, was the tower's first move. The second move was Elemental Burst, a Tier 4 curse that rivaled a Tier 5 spell. Even Tier 5 existences would not dare to take this move head-on. The third move was Elemental Seal, a spell that even Tier 5 beings were afraid of. Of course, unlike the first 2 moves, which only required a small number of magic crystals, activating Elemental Seal required mana stones. As Xueqi activated Elemental Burst, a 4-colored beam descended from the magic array above Zero Wing City, slamming into Dark Sickle and the black light ball before him. By the time the light faded, only an empty crater, over 10 meters deep, remained. Chapter 1916. Fame spreads, the evil dragon is dead. Impossible. That's a Tier 3 archaic species we're talking about. The spectating players gaped at the deep crater in the middle of the street, utterly frozen in shock. They had thought that their deaths were certain a moment ago, but in the next second, the evil dragon, which had been about to release a large-scale destruction spell, had died. It had been so thoroughly destroyed that not even ashes remained. So strong. That attack instantly killed the half-HP dragon. Big Sis Melody. Do you think that Zero Wing launched that attack just now? Scarlet Heart asked, overcome with shock. Although the evil dragon had lost a lot of HP during its fight against the NPC soldiers, it had over 15 million HP just a second ago. However, when the 4-colored light pillar had descended, the evil dragon hadn't even had time to scream before it had been destroyed. This was the first time she had witnessed such a devastating attack since joining God's domain. Not even a Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell could compare. Such a powerful attack would likely even injure mythic monsters. That's likely. But Zero Wing City's defenses truly are terrifying to annihilate a Tier 3 archaic species in one hit. I doubt other guilds have a chance of competing with Zero Wing in the Witch's Hill now, Melody said as she marveled at the magic barrier enveloping Zero Wing City. If Ninth Heaven's Guild Town were as powerful as Zero Wing City, it wouldn't have any problems dealing with the Death God Workshop. When players chose a guild town to visit, the most important aspect they took into account was the town's security. Whether it was independent players or merchant players, nobody wanted to die for no reason, wasting all of the effort they spent on leveling. Not only did Zero Wing City provide such a comfortable living environment, but its defenses were also immensely powerful. If they had the option, players would definitely choose to operate out of this city. What was that spell? Dark Sickle's magic resistance should have been boosted after transforming into an evil dragon. How could he have died despite still having over half of his HP? Wind Hunter's expression twisted when he saw the crater, void of the evil dragon. Although Dark Sickle was only a member of the second batch of experiments, the evil god's temple had spent a lot of resources on Dark Sickle's evil dragonification. Now that Dark Sickle was dead, those resources were gone. This outcome wouldn't have been so terrible if Dark Sickle had damaged Zero Wing City, but he hadn't even killed a single player. All Dark Sickle had accomplished was further solidifying the public's confidence in this city, which was the exact opposite of the evil god's temple's goal. The various guild upper echelons watching from a distance were in a similarly gloomy mood. Not only had Zero Wing City revealed its powerful domain magic array, but it also had command of such a powerful offensive spell. If any power had still harbored ideas of causing trouble in this city, they'd likely abandon the idea after today's display. I have to report this to the guild leader right away. Zero Wing City actually has such frightening defensive measures. It seems that we'll need to alter our plans and give up on the idea of harassing the city. We'll have to build a guild town in the Witch's Hill as soon as possible if we hope to compete with Zero Wing City. After this battle, the various guild upper echelons promptly reported to their respective superiors. They suggested that their guilds shift their focus to constructing a town in the map as soon as they could and avoid interfering with Zero Wing City's operations. If even a Tier 3 archaic species failed to cause trouble in the city, their guild's attempts would be an utter joke. Meanwhile, Xueqi, standing some distance away from the new crater, wasn't surprised in the least that Dark Sickle had died so quickly. Immediately, he instructed some of his NPCs to repair the damaged street and disperse the crowd, quickly ending this farce. The 4 Towers of Elements could even threaten a Tier 5 being, much less a Tier 3 evil dragon. This was also why he had stationed the Magic King in Silverwing Town instead of Zero Wing City. Once the lively Central District had returned to its former state, Xueqi called up Zero Wing City's system interface and selected 10 Tier 2 NPC soldiers with the most potential. He then armed them with the Bronze War God emblems. Although the Bronze War God emblems effects would not help these Tier 2 NPC soldiers reach the Tier 3 standard, it pushed them quite close to it. Even if a level 80 Grand Lord came to cause trouble, a patrol squad with one of these pseudo-Tier 3 NPCs could keep the creature busy until other squads arrived with the 4 Towers of Elements elemental suppression. If possible, Xueqi preferred to avoid using Elemental Bust. After all, the Tier 4 curse cost 2,000 magic crystals each time it activated. It was a considerable expenditure to Zero Wing. Meanwhile, news of the commotion in Zero Wing City quickly spread throughout Star Moon Kingdom. Players bombarded the kingdom's forums with discussions about the event. Tier 3 Evil Dragon appears in Zero Wing City. Tier 3 Archaic Species gets instant killed. The various discussions on the forums brought Zero Wing City into a new light for the kingdom's players. Some independent players and adventurer teams, who hadn't been particularly interested in the city, decided to shift their base of operations to Zero Wing City. In God's domain, NPC cities were the safest locations for player residences. Hence, many players preferred to develop in NPC cities that lacked resources rather than in cities with abundant resources and lacking security. After all, the cost of death was simply too high. They would rather level up at a slower pace than take such a risk. However, the situation had changed. Since Zero Wing City could even instant kill a Tier 3 archaic species, it was more than capable of doing the same for current players. If any player dared to cause trouble in the city, they'd suffer a similar fate as the Evil Dragon. One could say that Zero Wing City was now even safer than an ordinary NPC city. It also provided many benefits and occupied a resource-rich area. For a time, a large number of players in Star Moon Kingdom started to migrate to Zero Wing City, awaiting the Otherworld Gate's activation. In less than half an hour, Zero Wing City's player population had reached 10 million. Although many more players tried to enter the city, it had reached its maximum capacity. If players wished to enter the city, they would have to wait for others to leave it. Due to this, more than 100 adventurer teams now petitioned to join Zero Wing. Every one of these adventurer teams contacted Aqua Rose in the hopes that she could facilitate their merger, offering resources and lands that tempted the Zero Wing Vice Guild leader. One adventurer team's resources might not be a match for a large guild's, but over 100 teams combined would have a frightening amount furthermore. Many of the teams applying to join Zero Wing were well-known adventurer teams from Star Moon Kingdom and other countries. Their resources and lands were things that Zero Wing severely lacked. Because of this, Aqua Rose was at a loss, unsure of which adventurer teams to accept into the guild. Meanwhile, Melody, Scarlet Heart, and One-Arm Rashomon waited at the entrance to Zero Wing's guild residence. As they gazed at the many adventurer teams lined up to join the guild, they couldn't help their growing nerves. Big Sis Melody, with how powerful Zero Wing is right now, do you think guild leader Black Flame will accept our request? With the remuneration we plan to offer? Scarlet Heart asked nervously as she looked at the Tier 2 experts of the various adventurer teams entering Zero Wing's residence. These well-known adventurer teams all had a lot of resources and land saved up. Even so, they were still willing to hand everything over to Zero Wing in the hopes of merging their entire adventurer team with the guild. Compared to what these adventurer teams were offering, the remuneration they had prepared in exchange for Zero Wing's help with the Death God workshop was simply, "I don't know. We'll only find out once we've started the negotiations," Melody said, shaking her head. She wasn't particularly confident about their chances, either. The only thing they could do was rely on their relationship with Thoughtful Rain. Chapter 1917. Forest City Transaction. Zero Wing City. Zero Wing's residence. A large number of players crowded around the residence's entrance, applying to join Zero Wing. Many of these players were well-equipped, high-level experts, and quite a few were Tier 2 players. This scene surprised many passers-by. Tier 2 was currently the symbol of an expert. Even players that had only completed the normal mode promotion quest were considered experts. After all, the Tier 2 promotion quest was not easy to clear. It was impossible without reaching a certain standard. However, compared to the Tier 2 players outside of the residence, the adventurer teams in line truly dumbfounded the nearby spectators. Every adventurer team entering Zero Wing's residence possessed a certain degree of fame. Moreover, all of the team's representatives wore excellent equipment, with a few wearing level 50 fine gold equipment. There were also plenty of Tier 2 experts among these adventurer teams, and unlike the independent Tier 2 experts in line, the weakest among these adventurer team experts had completed the hard mode promotion quest. They had far more potential than the experts that had only completed the normal mode quest. With so many adventurer teams seeking to join Zero Wing's strength will quickly and significantly increase. Amazing! I've seen more than 20 adventurer teams entering the residence thus far. Combined, these adventurer teams have even more overall combat power than third-rate guilds. Hopefully, Zero Wing doesn't accept too many. Otherwise, independent players like us will have a much slimmer chance of joining the guild. The independent players in line were excited and worried as they watched the various adventurer teams following after Zero Wing's representatives. Now that Zero Wing City had revealed its powerful defenses, countless players wanted to develop in the city. Zero Wing's future was clear. Even if the guild lost its position in the Ore Empire, its standing in Star Moon Kingdom would be unshakable. To the general populace, Zero Wing was even stronger than a first-rate guild that occupied 2 or 3 kingdoms. A first-rate guild that occupied 2 or 3 kingdoms might have a lot of resources, but its development couldn't be considered stable. There was still a very high chance that other guilds would steal its resources. However, that was not the case for Zero Wing. As long as Zero Wing City stood, the guild's position in the kingdom would remain stable. With how powerful Zero Wing City's defenses were, it was very hard to imagine any power capturing or destroying the city. Even if a power were capable of doing so, it wouldn't likely be interested in a backwater country like Star Moon Kingdom. They'd definitely set their sights on better territories. While the crowd outside of the residence discussed Zero Wing's future, 2 women emerged from the residence. The moment these 2 women appeared, the crowd outside went into an uproar. This reaction wasn't due to the women's peerless beauty, but because of the guild emblems pinned to their armor. Not only did they wear mysterious iron guild emblems, but the emblems also radiated a dark purple glow. In Zero Wing, normal members didn't wear glowing guild emblems. Players would only get a glowing emblem once they became one of the guild's elites, their emblem emitting a light blue glow. The guild's core members wore guild emblems that gave off a light purple glow. Only the players who ranked in the top 10 of their class would wear a dark purple glowing emblem. Zero Wing's class rankings were determined by one's contribution to the guild and their combat power. Hence, the rankings were an incredibly reliable method of spotting an expert. The fact that these 2 women wore dark purple glowing guild emblems meant that they both had extremely high positions in Zero Wing. These 2 women were none other than Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo. When Melody saw the commotion Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo caused just with their appearance alone, she could not help but marvel at the situation. She had only become acquainted with Thoughtful Rain after helping the woman in a neutral map. She had recognized Thoughtful Rain's strength and had thought of poaching the woman into 9th heaven. However, looking at it now, she found the idea laughable. "Rain, what did your guild leader say?" Melody anxiously asked as the woman approached. "Big sis Melody. Don't worry. I've already talked to the guild leader. He says he is willing to hear you out," Thoughtful Rain said, smiling. "The guild leader is waiting for you in his office right now." I'll bring you to him. Your guild leader is willing to talk? Melody released a sigh of relief. Now that she understood how powerful Zero Wing was, she knew that it would be very difficult to secure a meeting with its guild leader, especially since her guild was merely an up-and-coming second-rate guild. Before seeking Thoughtful Rain's help, she had sought aid from several first-rate guilds, but when they had learned that her request was related to the Death God Workshop, they had even refused to meet with her, much less negotiate. Only the Setting Sun Guild had been willing to hear her out. As the players in line watched, Thoughtful Rain led the Ninth Heaven trio into Zero Wing's guild hall. The guild hall bustled with activity. Many of the guild's experts had returned to the residence in anticipation for the Otherworld gates opening. Currently, over 200 Tier 2 experts loitered around the first-floor hall, stupefying Melody and her companions. Zero Wing's Tier 2 experts easily outnumbered Ninth Heavens by many times. Moreover, this was only a portion of the guild's Tier 2 experts. Even first-rate guilds paled in comparison to Zero Wing. After a short moment, the group arrived before the guild leader's office on the guild hall's top floor. Currently, several dozen Tier 2 experts sat outside of the office, every one of which was level 56 or higher. These experts were all from the various adventurer teams applying to join Zero Wing. They would all be top-ranked players in any first-rate guild, but they sat quietly as if waiting for some kind of judgment. The hallway was deathly silent. However, Thoughtful Rain ignored these people as she led Melody's group into the guild leader's office. When Melody and the others entered the office, they felt an oppressive sensation overcome their bodies. This sensation didn't originate from Xueqi, who sat behind an office desk, but from Cola and the others, who stood near their guild leader. When they saw Cola and his companions' levels, Melody's group was speechless. Including Cola, 4 of these people had reached level 60, while the rest were level 59. Right now, even the highest-leveled player in Forest City was only level 58. You're here. Rain has already told me about your situation. Zero Wing can help you with your problem. But in return, Zero Wing wants 2 shops in Forest City's Central District. What are your thoughts on this condition? Xueqi said when he saw Melody entering the room. 2 Central District shops? Melody breathed a sigh of relief when she heard this. She had been afraid that Xueqi would try to take advantage of their predicament and rip them off, but he had simply asked for 1 more shop than she had initially prepared. That won't be a problem. However, may I know when Guild Leader Black Flame intends to deal with the matter regarding the Death God Workshop? If the situation dragged on for too long, Ninth Heaven's losses would become increasingly severe. Unfortunately, dealing with an organization like the Death God Workshop wasn't easy. Preparations had to be made. If Xueqi could give her a time frame, she would have an easier time coordinating with his guild. Once we sign a contract, I'll send Cola's group with you to Forest City to deal with the issue, Xueqi responded. Just them? One-arm Rashoman's eyes widened in shock when he heard Xueqi's plan. Turning to Cola and the others, he could not help but feel that Xueqi was taking them too lightly. Either that, or he had no idea of the Death God Workshop's strength. The Death God Workshop had several hundred members, and every one of them was an expert. Moreover, the workshop constantly employed hit-and-run tactics, making its movements unpredictable. Stopping the Death God Workshop with only the several players in Cola's party would be impossible. If the matter had been that simple, Ninth Heaven could have resolved it without help. Guild Leader Black Flame, the Death God Workshop is quite powerful, adept at using guerrilla warfare against guilds. Even superpowers have to tolerate their antics. With so few people, I'm afraid that. Melody tried to warn Xueqi. Relax. Cola's group will be enough. If it isn't, I'll find another way to deal with this problem, Xueqi said, chuckling. If you have no other concerns, let's sign the contract. Melody could not help but sigh at Xueqi's response, but since he had agreed to help, demanding too much wouldn't benefit her. She could only see how this played out if the problem persisted. Zero Wing would dispatch more experts to deal with the Death God Workshop. Chapter 1918. Fairy Country. Once Xueqi and Melody had signed their contract, Cola and Fire Dance, whom Xueqi had tasked with leading a 20-man team, followed Melody's group to Forest City. When Xueqi had finished with the situation regarding Ninth Heaven, he selected a few adventurer teams to annex into Zero Wing. These adventurer teams had been relatively powerful during his previous life, although they had yet to reach their full potential. Fortunately, their experts were no weaker than those in large guilds. They only lacked resources and combat experience. Among the adventurer teams that had applied, the Purple Thorns Kingdom's Unbounded had truly surprised Xueqi. Even now, Unbounded ranked among the top 100 adventurer teams in its kingdom. Stubborn Bone, Unbounded's commander, had also been quite famous in the past. Not only had he developed Unbounded into a top adventurer team, but he had also become a Tier 4 berserker himself. Unfortunately, due to a lack of equipment, he had never reached Tier 5. There was also another Unbounded member who had reached Tier 4, the Archlight Sword Emperor, 7 Light. Although 7 Light had been slightly weaker than Stubborn Bone, the difference hadn't been related to their technique standards, but due to a lack of proper equipment and weapons. Meanwhile, due to the fact that Unbounded had 2 Tier 4 expert members, it had barely qualified as a top adventurer team in the Secret Pavilion's eyes. Even so, the feat was impressive. After all, top adventurer teams that earned the Secret Pavilion's recognition could even rival the best second-rate guilds, with some of the more powerful teams rivaling first-rate guilds. Now that Zero Wing had annexed Unbounded, this had guaranteed that Zero Wing would have 2 more peak experts in the future. Moreover, since Unbounded had focused its development in the Purple Thorns Kingdom, the adventurer team had established a foundation in the kingdom. After annexing Unbounded, Zero Wing would have more influence in the kingdom, which would, in turn, make it easier to obtain resources unique to the kingdom. After Xueqi finished selecting adventurer teams, he made his way to the Candlelight trading firm and started to mass-produce all-round devices. He also instructed Melancholic Smile to arrange the production of advanced darkness resistance potions in preparation for his expedition to Kama Island. Meanwhile, in the second-floor hall of Zero Wing's Guild Hall, when the various adventurer team representatives waiting in the hall saw Aqua Rose, they all could not help but grow nervous. After researching your adventurer teams, we have decided that we will only fully welcome the teams on this list for those not listed. Zero Wing will accept a portion of your members, Aqua Rose said as she passed a list to the various adventurer teams present. Also, every adventurer team that agrees to join will receive 20 internal member slots in Zero Wing. If you agree to these conditions, you may see me to sign a contract, becoming one of our guild members. Currently, more than 60 adventurer teams were interested in joining Zero Wing, but the guild could only afford to recruit a limited number of players. If Zero Wing recruited too many, it would only hinder the guild's development. Hence, including the adventurer team Xueqi had handpicked, Aqua Rose had only decided to allow 11 adventurer teams to join Zero Wing, all of which had relatively strong Tier 2 experts and resources that would be crucial to Zero Wing's development. After checking the list, some of the adventurer teams celebrated, while others were frustrated. Commander, this is great. Our adventurer team can join Zero Wing as a whole. 7 Light exclaimed after reading the list. After witnessing Xueqi's fight with the evil dragon, his desire to join the guild had grown. Despite being at a disadvantage in terms of strength and speed, Xueqi had relied on his extraordinary techniques to render the evil dragon powerless. He had been utterly mesmerized. When he thought about how he might be able to seek guidance from Xueqi after joining the guild, he couldn't help his excitement. For now, I'll go and apply to form a 1,000-man legion with Zero Wing while you head back and prepare our players to migrate to Zero Wing City. From now on, we'll operate out of this city. Stubborn Bone was just as elated. Even before applying to join Zero Wing, he had heard that Zero Wing offered amazing benefits to its players. When he had stepped into Zero Wing's residence, he had learned that the reality was even better than the rumors. Not only did Zero Wing's members have priority when using the battle arena's combat rooms, but they could also rent advanced combat rooms in exchange for GCPs. As long as they had enough GCPs, they could even learn all kinds of combat techniques. However, what surprised him the most was Zero Wing's guild warehouse. There were even level 55 and 60 dark gold weapons and equipment available for purchase. Of course, guild members had to have enough GCPs and sufficient status to buy these items. Only core members were allowed access to top-tier items. Even so, elite members could purchase level 55 and 60 fine gold weapons and equipment. Moreover, Zero Wing's members had a variety of methods to earn money. Not only were a ton of high-ranked quests available in the guild's various residences, but there were also plenty of guild transportation quests available in Silverwing City. These guild transportation quests awarded far better remuneration than the transportation firm's quests for non-guild members. With all of these resources, Stubborn Bone even had hope of becoming a peak expert in God's domain. However, he wanted to get Unbounded's member settled in Zero Wing City first. Then, he would do everything he could to raise his position in the guild. He could only secure more resources to grow by doing so. All of the adventurer teams that joined Zero Wing would start as normal members, and commanders were no exception. Meanwhile, in the fairy country, a neutral map far away from Star Moon Kingdom. Under Melody's lead, Cola and the others finally arrived at the fairy country's forest city. This place is so prosperous. It seems like there are so many more players here than in Star Moon City. Shadow Sword was a little surprised to see half-beastmen and half-elves filling the streets. Fire Dance and the others nodded in agreement. In their opinion, very few players should choose to play as a neutral race, but Forest City's streets were packed. Moreover, all of these players were very high-leveled, with most having passed level 55. Many of them had even reached level 57, which only expert players could do at this stage of the game. In fact, Forest City likely had more level 57 players than Zero Wing City. Forest City is the fairy country's capital. 1/3 of the country's half-beastmen and half-elves are here. Although it can't compare to an empire's imperial capital, it's more prosperous than an ordinary kingdom's capital. Fairy Country is a hub for players seeking individual strength. Players come here from various kingdoms and empires. If you gather all these players in a single location, it is only natural that you'd get a frightening number. Moreover, more players continue to flood into the city. This is why so many large guilds have set their sights on the Fairy Country. Some guilds have even converted all of their players into neutral races, Melody explained. There are as many as 5 first-rate guilds operating in Forest City, and everyone is competing over the position as the city's overlord. 5 first-rate guilds are competing over this city? Fire Dance was astonished. During the game's early stages, the competition in Star Moon Kingdom had been intense, but only 3 first-rate guilds had participated. However, 5 first-rate guilds fought over this single NPC city. Of course, Fire Dance recognized Forest City's value. Not long after Melody introduced Fire Dance and her team to the mesmerizing Forest City, she received a message. As she read it, Melody's expression darkened. Has something happened? Fire Dance asked when she noticed the change. I've just received a report stating that the Death God Workshop has taken action yet again. Just some time ago, the workshop ambushed one of our 1,000-man teams while it raided a field boss, Melody said grimly. The Death God Workshop? Hearing Melody's words, a joyful smile lit up Fire Dance's face as she asked, Can you take us there now? Now. Melody was stunned for a moment. We're pretty far from the ambush site. By the time we arrive, they will be gone. Moreover, the Death God Workshop only dispatched a 100-man team this time, and every member is an expert. With just the 20 of you, I'm afraid that... It's fine. Just lead us there to take a look, Fire Dance gently demanded with a calm smile. Chapter 1919. Battlefield of Monsters. Hearing Fire Dance's confident tone, Melody sent one-arm Rashomon to organize a team. While she understood that Fire Dance and the others were extraordinarily strong, the Death God Workshop was not a simple opponent otherwise. Forest City's various first-rate guilds wouldn't have such a massive headache over the workshop. It should be known that the Death God Workshop had ambushed those guilds' teams many times, but the workshop's members were quite cunning. Despite doing all they could to retaliate, their efforts had been wasted on a few small fries. They couldn't reach the Death God Workshop's core. This was also why only the super first-rate guild, Setting Sun, of all the guilds she had reached out to, had been willing to help them. However, the Setting Sun's price was just vicious. Accepting Setting Sun's offer was no different than giving the guild, which she had gone to great lengths to develop, away. She would never agree to such a thing. Meanwhile, with how many members the Death God Workshop had mobilized to ambush Ninth Heaven's 1,000-man team, they'd suffer a massive loss if Fire Dance and her companions actually found the workshop's members. Hence, as a precaution, she had decided to take some of her people along. She couldn't afford to let Fire Dance and the others die so soon after reaching Forest City. It would be hard to explain to Zero Wing. Due to time constraints, one-arm Rashomon was only able to gather a little over 200 experts from the guild before Melody led Fire Dance and the team to Wisp Cemetery, a level 60 to 75 map some distance from Forest City. Dark clouds covered the sky above Wisp Cemetery throughout the year, and although lush forest occupied the area, it gave off an oppressive and gloomy aura. However, since this was a high-resource map, many guilds often grinded and collected resources here. Melody and her group carefully advanced down a forest path as they made their way towards the reported battlefield. Although not many monsters called Wisp Cemetery home, the wandering wisps in the area were incredibly troublesome. Once they spotted living creatures, they'd call upon a small force of undead creatures to eliminate the intruders. These little monsters could easily summon hundreds and thousands of undead creatures with its call. To make matters worse, not only did the undead creatures provide very little EXP, but they also almost never dropped good items. As a result, players grinding in the Wisp Cemetery tried to avoid the wandering wisps and undead creatures as often as possible. After traveling through the Wisp Cemetery for about half an hour, Melody's group finally reached the ambush site. The Death God Workshop had ambushed Ninth Heaven's players at the entrance of an underground tomb. The tomb contained a level 63 field boss, and the Death God Workshop had killed both Ninth Heaven's members and the field boss during its ambush. Traces of combat were evident in and outside of the tomb. It was clear that the recent battle had been intense. Players' blood had been scattered across the ground, filling the air with its stench. They must have executed the ambush during the boss fight. They must have stationed some players outside of the tomb to stop anyone from escaping. Were there any survivors from the 1,000-man team? Thoughtful Rain turned to ask Melody after observing the bloodstains. Not one person managed to escape. The Death God Workshop always operates this way. Whenever the workshop launches an ambush, it uses a magic scroll to seal the area, preventing players from using instantaneous movement scrolls and return scrolls, Melody said, gnashing her teeth. Although the ambush team wasn't the guild's main force, it was an elite team led by expert players. Losing the entire team had incurred significant losses. Not only had every player died, but they had also all lost a piece of equipment. The lost weapons and equipment were far more of a problem than the lost levels. Big Sis Fire. Too much time has passed since the end of the battle. The players from the workshop have already left the area, and their tracks have faded. I'm afraid that chasing after them is impossible, Flying Shadow said after getting no results from his tracking skills. Your Tier 1 tracking skill isn't enough. Fortunately, I recently learned Mana Perception, a rare Tier 2 tracking skill. I can now perceive traces that aren't visible to the naked eye. To put it simply, I can see the mana fluctuations players leave behind. It's been less than 3 hours since the battle ended, so the Death God Workshop players are still within my perception range. Not even a Tier 1 anti-tracking skill will have any effect against my skill, Fire Dance said, smiling faintly. Why else do you think the guild leader sent me? Hearing Fire Dance's words, Flying Shadow grew a little excited. He had thought this job would be difficult, but it seemed that they'd be able to complete the task quickly with Fire Dance's new skill. Fire Dance then proceeded to use Mana Perception, tracking the ambushing players. If the Death God Workshop members had used a return scroll to leave the area, she wouldn't have been able to track them. However, she'd find them as long as they simply walked away. These people haven't left using a return scroll. After lingering here for some time, they headed north, Fire Dance said as she watched the mana fluctuations lead into the forest. Hurriedly, she said, they only left about an hour ago. We still have hope of catching up to them. Let's move out. Saying so, Fire Dance took the lead and followed the mana fluctuations with her teammates close behind. She found them? Melody could not help her growing excitement. Hurriedly, she and the 200+ experts from her guild followed after Fire Dance. She had never thought that Fire Dance was so amazing to locate a trail that was more than an hour old. Ordinary tracking skills were impressive enough if they could find 30-minute-old traces. If the target had an anti-tracking skill, finding them would be even more difficult. After following the trail for about half an hour, the group finally arrived before an ancient temple nestled in a thick grove of trees. At a glance, over 500 players were gathered before the temple's entrance. However, these players were a part of two different groups, a 60-man team and a 500-man team. All of the 500 wore uniform equipment of relatively high quality, and they were all level 56 or above. This was obviously a guild team. Ha! Isn't that East Crow's troubled madness? Melody, who had hidden behind a tree, wondered aloud when she saw a righteous man among the 500-man team. The man wore aqua-blue mage robes and held a staff embedded with 3 resplendent gemstones. Why is he here? Troubled Madness was a vice guild leader from East Crow, a first-rate guild. In terms of individual strength, he ranked among the top in his guild. He was also one of the top-ranking elementalists in Forest City, and he wasn't any weaker than she was. East Crow's 500-man team had surrounded the Death God Workshop's 60 members. It was evident that East Crow had located the troublesome players before her group. How fortunate! I had never thought that I'd get to meet 2 of the Death God Workshop's famous commanders, Frost Rain and Chopped Axe, at the same time. You have been challenging to track down. Now, it's time to pay for your past transgressions. Troubled Madness snarled as he glared at a man and a woman amidst the Death God Workshop's group. The middle-aged man that had a scholarly look was a level 58, Tier 2 swordsman, while the tall woman exuding a wild aura was a level 58, Tier 2 berserker. Frost, what do you think we did to East Crow? The tall woman asked as she considered the situation. It seemed as if she were trying to remember what she had done to this first-rate guild. I don't remember. We've done a lot of things. There's no way I can remember everything. Since we can't remember, it shouldn't have been important, Frost Rain, the scholarly man, said with a wave of his hand, expressing his lack of concern over such trivial matters. A mere workshop dares to mock East Crow. We already have you surrounded. None of you should think of leaving this place alive. Troubled Madness bellowed in rage. East Crow's other members went into a frenzy, killing intent flooding from them as they charged at the Death God Workshop players. The workshop's players had previously killed their guild leader in the fields and stole an important epic weapon, yet they acted as if the incident meant nothing. Why wouldn't this enrage East Crow's players? Countless spells and arrows rained down on the Death God Workshop's members as East Crow's MTs and melee players tightened their circle. All of these guild players were experts, and their coordination was seamless. After so much talk, you still attack us? Chopped Axe, the tall woman exclaimed, I haven't had my fill yet, so let's see how far you East Crow players can go. After saying so, Chopped Axe charged into the shrinking wall of players. Frost Rain, however, showed no interest in the battle. He yawned with boredom, further inciting guild players' fury. The MTs and melee players on the front line began to employ their specialty moves, meeting Chopped Axe in battle. Elated, Chopped Axe raised the excessively large axe in her hands and brandished it at the approaching players. Pang, pang, pang. As the two sides clashed, the level 56+ shield warriors, guardian knights, berserkers, swordsmen, and assassins were sent flying, their HPs plummeting. Not even their healers could keep up with the damage. In less than 30 seconds, Chopped Axe had carved a hole in East Crow's encirclement. Seeing this, the Death God Workshop members surged through the gap and assaulted the guild's ranged players. In less than a minute after the battle had begun, only half of East Crow's 500-man team remained alive, yet the workshop's team had only suffered a few casualties. The guild players' screams filled the battlefield, and to make matters worse, not a single player lasted more than 5 moves against Chopped Axe. Even Tier 2 MTs fell after 4 of her attacks. She was unstoppable on the battlefield. Is she a monster? Troubled Madness was dazed as he watched the woman's rampant slaughter, his fighting spirit fizzling out. How boring. You're giving up already? Chopped Axe clicked her tongue when she noticed the fear in Troubled Madness's eyes, clearly disappointed. All right, Axe, that's enough. We don't have time to play with these people. We need to get into the temple quickly, Frost Rain, who hadn't made a single move, reminded his comrade as he gestured to the temple before him. He completely ignored the 200+ East Crow members that were still alive. Chapter 1920, Zero Wing vs. Death God. As Troubled Madness and the other East Crow members lost their fighting spirit, they started to pull away from the Death God Workshop's team, trying to avoid the axe-wielding Chopped Axe in particular. Fear overwhelmed the guild players. No matter how they looked at it, this one-sided battle felt like a nightmare. They were all experts from East Crow, a first-rate guild, but they were nothing more than powerless children before the workshop's players. If they retold this tale in Forest City, no one would believe them. As neutral race players, their Tier 2 promotion quests were more difficult than human players. Of course, after completing their Tier 2 promotion, their racial traits were boosted, as well. They were even stronger than ordinary Tier 2 classes. But despite so many Tier 2 players on their team, They had no hope of resisting Chopped Axe. Moreover, the female berserker hadn't used a single skill, relying on her techniques in this battle. As East Crow's members retreated, Death God Workshop's members lost interest in the fight. They didn't even bother to chase down the guild players. Instead, they turned and walked toward the temple. Vice Guild Leader, what should we do? A Tier 2 cleric asked Troubled Madness when he realized that the workshop's players were ignoring their guild. There's nothing we can do. These people are monsters. Chopped Axe, in particular, has the strength of a 1,000-man legion. We have no chance against her. Most likely, only Setting Sun, which is interested in Forest City, can stop them now, Troubled Madness said as he balled his fists, fear and frustration filling his heart. Although he was a powerful expert, he could only take on 24 experts at the same time. Against a 100-man expert team, even he would have to flee. In contrast, Chopped Axe had just rendered a 500 expert team powerless. With such strength, it would take 1,000 experts to defeat the woman. In other words, Chopped Axe had the strength to single-handedly change the outcome of a battle of several thousand players. Be an absolute nightmare in the fields. Meanwhile, Melody and the other Ninth Heaven members wore grim expressions after watching the battle from their hiding spot in the forest near the temple. How can the Death God Workshop have such a powerful expert? Melody watched Chopped Axe in a daze. Although the Death God Workshop members her guild had encountered were impressive, there hadn't been anyone as strong as Chopped Axe among the group. East Crow's experts were much stronger than independent experts, and while independent players would be considered experts after reaching the early stage of the Trial Tower's 5th floor, East Crow's experts had reached the 5th floor's late stage at the very least. And still, those experts were helpless against Chopped Axe. Although she had brought a little over 200 guild experts with her, these players' overall strength couldn't compare to Troubled Madness's 500-man team. Moreover, Troubled Madness was just as strong as she was. So, they're the Death God Workshop's members? Fire Dance asked Melody. MHM. They are. Melody nodded. It seems this trip wasn't a complete waste of time after all, Fire Dance said as she watched the group of players approach the mysterious temple. She then turned to her guildmates and announced, "All right, time to get to work." Saying so, Fire Dance emerged from the grove of trees and approached the players from the Death God Workshop. "We're getting to work." Cola and the other Zero Wing members grinned before following after Fire Dance. "What are you doing?" Melody's anxiety peaked as she watched Fire Dance and her companions leave their hiding place. "Didn't you just see how powerful those players are? With our current team, we won't even serve as a warm-up. We should return and organize a stronger team." The Death God Workshop's commanders were its strongest players. She had assumed that while these commanders might be strong, they shouldn't be much stronger than the workshop's other players, but it seemed that she had been gravely mistaken. Moreover, this Death God Workshop team was led by 2 commander-level existences. When she considered the possibility of the scholarly man, Frost Rain, being as powerful as Chopped Axe, she shuddered. Fighting the 2 Death God Workshop commanders at the same time would be suicidal. However, despite Melody's advice, Fire Dance stepped out of the forest's cover as if she hadn't heard Melody at all. "Guild Leader, what should we do?" Scarlet Heart asked nervously. "We have no choice. We have to follow them. We are responsible for requesting Zero Wing's help. We can't sit here and do nothing while they fight." Melody sighed as she and her guild members followed Zero Wing's team. The temple's entrance was an empty clearing, void of any obstructions. The moment Fire Dance and her team appeared, they attracted the attention of East Crow's members. "Who are they?" "Ha! They're human. Why are humans here?" East Crow's members softly discussed the approaching players. Aside from merchant players, human players were rare in the fairy country. Naturally, spotting a group of 20 human players would be odd. Shortly after Zero Wing's members left the forest, Ninth Heaven's players revealed themselves. Since Ninth Heaven was a local first-rate guild, East Crow's members recognized the expert players, especially Melody. For a time, a commotion erupted among East Crow's members. What is Ninth Heaven's guild leader doing here? Did she come to take revenge for the Death God Workshop's recent ambush? That shouldn't be the case, right? Didn't she see the fight just now? Even with our numbers, we were no match. And she only has around 200 experts with her. With so few players, they won't even be a warm-up for Chopped Axe. They must have missed it. Why else would they make such a foolish move? East Crow's members were shocked as they watched Ninth Heaven's team approach the Death God Workshop members. They could not figure out what Melody was trying to do. Troubled Madness agreed that Melody must have lost her mind. Even if she hadn't seen the battle, she should at least notice the corpses littering the clearing. Oh, aren't you from Ninth Heaven? Chopped Axe recognized Melody's group immediately. Smiling, she asked, "What? You want revenge for the trash we killed just now? Feel free to try. I can use this chance to stretch before going into the temple." Guild leader Melody, "Don't mind Chopped Axe. She is just joking." "Don't take her seriously," Frost Rain, who stood beside Chopped Axe, said, smiling at Melody. "If Ninth Heaven is willing to hand the item over, the Death God Workshop will stop targeting your members. I hope that you have carefully considered the matter. Don't even think about it. I will never hand it over to you." Melody growled, rage burning in her gaze. "It seems Guild leader Melody still doesn't understand us. Since you're here, then, I'll show you the difference between us personally," Frost Rain said. Turning to his team members, he said, "Go. Remove these players, but leave Guild leader Melody alive." Hearing Frost Rain's command, the several dozen Death God Workshop members pounced on Ninth Heaven's members like wild beasts. They treated the 200-plus experts before them like prey awaiting slaughter. "Everyone, prepare for battle. Do not fight alone," Melody said, her expression grim as she glared at the 50-plus players charging towards her. Although these Death God Workshop members were not as monstrous as Chopped Axe, they were extraordinarily powerful. She knew from watching the previous battle that they were far stronger than ordinary experts. Just before the workshop's players reached Ninth Heaven's members, a black-clad figure appeared before one of the level 57, Tier 2 Guardian Knights leading the charge. This figure then transformed into a shadow as it pierced through the Guardian Knight. Without time to utter a scream, the Tier 2 Guardian Knight collapsed to the ground, his HP bar drained to nothing. The workshop's players slid to a halt after seeing the shocking attack, turning towards the figure. "Who are you?" the Death God Workshop members demanded as they watched the figure, afraid. "I am Zero Wings Fire Dance." Fire Dance introduced herself as she sheathed 1,000 transformations. Sweeping a glance over the Death God Workshop's members, she calmly stated, "I'm here to bury you." Chapter 1921. Duel of Strength. The Death God Workshop's members shot Fire Dance chilling expressions after hearing her statement. "You're here to bury us? How bold. This woman must be dreaming." Although Fire Dance's level 60 was surprising, a 2 or 3 level difference was nothing to experts like them. They were merely on alert due to her successfully ambushing and killing a Tier 2 metric tons. However, Fire Dance was dearly mistaken if she thought that she could slay them all. Several melee experts immediately charged at the assassin, striking with axes, spears, and great swords simultaneously. These experts' coordination blocked all paths of retreat available. However, Fire Dance did not remain idle. Unsheathing 1,000 transformations once more, she met the approaching weapons with her fragmented legendary sword. When the weapons collided, something astonishing occurred. The impact threw the several charging melee players, and despite all of them being Tier 2 experts, they felt their arms numb from the force, their weapons trembling violently. How can an assassin have so much strength? The several Death God Workshop members that had attacked stared at Fire Dance as she charged towards them in horror. Their movements were still stiff, so their mobility was limited. They couldn't even defend themselves. Realizing that something was amiss, the workshop's ranged players hurriedly launched attacks at the darting assassin. Countless spells and arrows rained down on Fire Dance, covering enough area that she couldn't avoid all of the attacks in time. However, just before the attack struck Fire Dance, a giant of a figure appeared before her. It was none other than Kola, who was more than eager to join the fray. With his shield raised, a barrier of light formed before him, preventing any ranged attacks from reaching his comrade. Even after taking a beating from the ranged attacks, the light barrier remained intact. Meanwhile, Fire Dance arrived before the several stiffened melee players. Executing Absolute Strike and Shadow Turmoil, she killed 2 of them instantly. This turn of events made the Death God Workshop members frown deeply. When Fire Dance had ambushed and killed the Tier 2 metric tons, They hadn't gotten a clear view of the assassins' combat standards, but after this clash, they knew that both Fire Dance and Cola were extremely powerful experts. Their grasp on timing and their coordination were incredible. So strong. Troubled Madness, who watched the battle from a safe distance, gasped when Fire Dance had instantly eliminated 2 players. After fighting the Death God Workshop earlier, he had learned how powerful the workshop's Tier 2 experts were. Even in a one-on-one, he was not confident of defeating those experts decisively, let alone several of them at once. It seems you're not all talk after all. I finally get to have some fun. Chopped Axe licked the corner of her lips before raising her gigantic battle axe and charging at the human assassin. Although Chopped Axe was a berserker, her movement speed was even higher than ordinary assassins. Fully displaying the benefit of being a tigerkin, she left afterimages wherever she passed. By the time Fire Dance had killed her 4th Death God Workshop member, Chopped Axe had appeared before the female assassin. Raising her battle axe with a single hand, she sent a powerful chop at Fire Dance. As the weapon descended, space around its blade showed faint signs of crumbling. Tier 2 skill, Spatial Quake. Not only did Spatial Quake temporarily increase her strength, but it also dealt damage in a 5 by 15 yard area before her. It was one of the few AoE skills the Berserker class possessed. Not one to fall behind, Fire Dance used the Tier 2 skill, Shadow Edge. Unlike the earlier clashes, neither player had been thrown when Fire Dance's short sword met Chopped Axe's colossal weapon. However, the resulting impact was so powerful that space around them cracked. The women looked at each other in astonishment. How is this possible? How can a human assassin have so much strength? I'm a tigerkin, for God's sake. This berserker's strength is actually a match for mine. The outcome even surprised the Death God Workshop's Frost Rain and Zero Wings members. Chopped Axe was a tigerkin. Her body's innate strength far surpassed that of a human. She had also learned super rare passive skills and wielded a special legacy. Moreover, her weapon was an epic battle axe. Her strength was even unrivaled within the Death God Workshop. The unexpected outcome put Chopped Axe in a very bad mood. She, someone famed for her strength, had failed to defeat a human assassin in a duel of the attribute. This was unforgivable. As for Cola and the others, they were fully aware of just how powerful Fire Dance was. Not only did she wear multiple pieces of epic equipment, but she also wielded 1,000 transformations. Since Cola had his own fragmented legendary item, he could guess that her short sword was the same rank. If that were the case, only Sherfong and Gentle Snow could likely surpass Fire Dance's strength. Yet, despite being so powerful, Fire Dance's clash with the Tigerkin Berserker had ended in a tie. While everyone was still shocked by the collision, neither Fire Dance nor Chopped Axe gave their opponent an opportunity as they continued to launch frenzied attacks. For a time, afterimages of Fire Dance's short sword and Chopped Axe's axe filled the battlefield. Chopped Axe had better techniques than Fire Dance, and it was evident that she had reached the flowing water realm. She could perceive Fire Dance's attacks as soon as the human assassin began to execute them. However, Fire Dance was an assassin. Strength wasn't her forte. Her true power lay in her speed, so even though the Berserker could read her movements, she still had an advantage with her movement speed, making up for her weaker combat standard. Despite such a thrilling battle, where her life would be forfeit if she made a single mistake, Fire Dance very much enjoyed this moment. Throughout this battle, she recognized many of her deficiencies and perfected her techniques. Fortunately, the same could not be said for Chopped Axe. She could only watch, displeased, as the human assassin continued to improve as they dueled. You dare use me as a grinding stone. Do you think I will give you enough time to grow stronger? Chopped Axe immediately activated her berserk skill, Savage God's Power, her muscles rapidly expanding. In the blink of an eye, she transformed into a 3-meter-tall giant. At the same time, an extra crimson battle axe had appeared in her hand, radiating waves of bone-chilling mana. You are the first person in the fairy country to force me to use this move. Now, go to hell. Chopped Axe then swung her blades in a powerful downward slash towards Fire Dance. Tier 2 taboo skill, Meteoric Annihilation. Suddenly, over a dozen crimson axes descended from the sky, each carrying the weight of a mountain. In response, Fire Dance activated Power of Darkness before brandishing 1,000 transformations, sending countless water whips at the falling axe blades. Domain skill. Water binding. Chapter 1922. Painful lesson. When the two powerful skills clashed, an intense shockwave shook the ground and the surrounding players. At the same time, the ground at the epicenter of the collision shattered and crumbled, a huge crater forming around the two women. Shockingly huge cracks spread out from the crater. There simply was no comparison between this clash and the numerous exchanges the two had before. As the attacks of meteoric annihilation and water binding disappeared, fire dances and chopped axes figures emerged, standing quietly inside the crater. Although both sides remained completely unscathed, the expressions both women wore were completely different, one of them incomparably excited and the other astonished. This assassin actually stopped my strongest skill? At this moment, Chopped Axe's complexion turned ashen as she looked at Fire Dance, her earlier sense of ease gone. Meteoric Annihilation was a Tier 2 taboo skill. Combined with her Berserk skill, she could send even a Grand Lord of the same level stumbling back. She was extremely confident in this move of hers and believed that no player could receive it head-on. Yet, despite Fire Dance being only an assassin, not only did the female assassin manage to stop her attack without receiving any damage, but she had even done so without using Vanish, a well-known life-saving skill of the assassin class. This was definitely an outcome that Chopped Axe could neither accept nor tolerate. However, after Chopped Axe's skill came to an end, Fire Dance's water binding was still in effect. The assassin immediately sent water whips at Chopped Axe, one after another, each whip containing strength surpassing Fire Dance's own. In the blink of an eye, 6 whips lashed at Chopped Axe from multiple directions, attacking so fast that the Tigerkin Berserker was forced to use her battle axe to defend herself. For a time, Chopped Axe actually fell into a disadvantage and could only focus on defending herself. Amazing! She is actually suppressing Chopped Axe all by herself? Melody was filled with an indescribable sense of surprise as she watched the battle between Fire Dance and Chopped Axe. She never thought that Fire Dance was this strong. Meanwhile, Troubled Madness, who was spectating the battle from afar, was goggling in shock. He simply could not bring himself to believe that Chopped Axe, the person who had freely slaughtered East Crow's members before, could only focus on defense now. Moreover, at this moment, Chopped Axe wasn't the only person at a disadvantage. The other Death God Workshop members were also engaged in a bitter battle with the other Zero Wing members. Despite the Death God Workshop members' numerical advantage, they were no match for their opponents at all, dying one after another. Shortly after Fire Dance started suppressing Chopped Axe, the half-elf Frost Rain finally made his move. After activating his Berserk skill, he began chanting an incantation and drawing line after line of divine runes. A moment later, ice swords appeared in the sky one after another, easily numbering more than 20. These ice swords then descended on Fire Dance. At the same time, a thick wall of dirt formed around the female assassin, preventing her from escaping the ice sword's AoE. Due to the ice swords, Fire Dance gave up on attacking Chopped Axe. Instead, she had her water whips circulate around herself, forming a defensive barrier that kept the ice swords away from herself. However, Chopped Axe did not idle around during this time, either, continuously swinging her 2 battle axes against Fire Dance's water barrier, the might of her axes tearing a gap through it. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Frost Rain redirected some of his ice swords towards this gap. Despite seeing the approaching attacks, Fire Dance showed no intention of dodging whatsoever. Instead, she brandished 1,000 transformations and struck down the ice swords one after another. Due to Frost Rain's participation in the battle, Fire Dance became busy. "Aren't you all going to help her?" Melody asked anxiously as she turned to look at Alluring Summer and Violet Cloud, who had not moved at all thus far. It might have been fine for these two women not to take action before, since Zero Wing's dozen or so players were more than enough to suppress the 40-plus members of the Death God Workshop. However, now that Chopped Axe and Frost Rain had teamed up to deal with Fire Dance, if Alluring Summer and Violet Cloud still insisted on standing aside, then Fire Dance really would be in trouble. After all, both Chopped Axe and Frost Rain were commanders in the Death God Workshop. Frost Rain's combat power was not the least bit inferior to Chopped Axe's. With the two of them working together, their combat power increased exponentially. The slightest gap in Fire Dance's defense would get her killed instantly. However, all Melody's question did was earn her confused looks from Alluring Summer and Violet Cloud. Why should we ruin such a rare opportunity for Fire? Fire is perfecting her techniques right now. Can't you see how happy she is? But those two are commanders of the Death God workshop, the strongest experts in the workshop. Either of them can go up against a legion of 1,000 experts on their own. Even if Fire Dance is stronger than either one, dealing with both at the same time is. Melody fell speechless at the serious expressions Alluring Summer and Violet Cloud had. Fire Dance was obviously at a disadvantage right now, forced into constant defense. She would be killed if she made even the smallest mistake. While the loss of EXP might not be a big problem, it would be a huge loss if Chopped Axe or Frost Rain managed to loot the weapon or equipment Fire Dance dropped. After all, the fact that Fire Dance boasted such frightening strength and speed proved that her weapons and equipment were extraordinary. Two commanders from the Death God workshop? Violet Cloud giggled involuntarily at Melody's words. If 4 or 5 commanders went at Big Sis Fire together, this battle might be a little more interesting. 4 or 5 commanders? This comment stunned Melody. She felt that Violet Cloud was a little too overconfident in Fire Dance's abilities. After all, the Death God workshop was an adventurer team that even super guilds chose to ignore. Melody had long heard that every one of the workshop's commanders could rival the peak experts of super guilds in terms of combat power. Despite that, Violet Cloud was actually saying that Fire Dance could handle 4 or 5 of such commanders. While Melody was conversing with Alluring Summer and Violet Cloud, Chopped Axes and Frost Rain's attacks grew even fiercer. Frost Rain ceaselessly bombarded Fire Dance with spells, giving her no chance to catch a breath. Once he noticed a gap in the assassin's defense, he would immediately strike at it. Meanwhile, Chopped Axe kept creating gaps in Fire Dance's defense. Occasionally, she even moved into melee range and trade blow for blow with Fire Dance. After the trio continued this struggle for a short while, Fire Dance's HP finally started decreasing. Although the assassin had the protection of her armor, just a graze from Chopped Axe's battle axes inflicted a heavy impact. Blood was even leaking from her mouth now. Fortunately, the physical injuries she sustained thus far were still not at a point where they would affect her combat power. Of course, Chopped Axe wasn't having a good time, either. Trading blows with Fire Dance had opened cuts and cracks on the Berserker's armor, the impact so heavy that the Tigerkin would spit out mouthfuls of blood, her HP decreasing by chunks. That weapon really is amazing. It even cuts through my dark gold armor. Chopped Axe was shocked as she took in her damaged armor. She then turned to look at the distant Frost Rain and said, "We can't continue like this. Let's use the combination attack." Nodding in response, Frost Rain promptly changed his attack method and started double speed casting. Meanwhile, Chopped Axe tore her epic battle axe and gripped the crimson battle axe with both hands. Her dark gray irises then turned silvery white as 6 small magic arrays appeared around her. She then charged straight at Fire Dance. When Chopped Axe got within 15 yards of Fire Dance, she suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, 6 doppelgangers of the female berserker appeared around Fire Dance, all 6 leaping into the air and chopping down at the female assassin. At this time, Frost Rain finished casting his spells. Immediately, frost barriers appeared around Fire Dance one after another, the ground she stood on also giving off a crimson glow as if something was about to spew out from the ground. Combination skill: Frostfire Annihilation. It's over. When Melody saw this scene, she deeply felt death looming over her. Now, she was certain that Alluring Summer and Violet Cloud were overconfident about Fire Dance's abilities. As expected of the famous Death God workshop, this trip really isn't a waste. A touch of joy appeared on Fire Dance's face when she looked at the combination skill her 2 opponents were executing. She promptly cancelled Water Binding and activated the Petrified Thorns Petrification domain. Die! The 6 Chopped Axes yelled simultaneously just as they were about to hit Fire Dance. The 6 doppelgangers possessed 100% of the main body's strength. Meanwhile, the axes of all 6 covered the entire area Fire Dance stood in. When all 6 axes landed, the power they carried was so great that even space itself showed signs of shattering. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time as the axes landed, the ground beneath Fire Dance burst apart. A towering pillar of fire emerged from the ground, enveloping Fire Dance completely. As the fire pillar dissipated, a lava field could be seen replacing the ground Fire Dance originally stood on. Meanwhile, surrounding the lava was an ice field. Seen from afar, this scene was spectacular. She's finally dead? Chopped Axe heaved a deep sigh of relief when she saw Fire Dance's corpse starting to disintegrate in the lava field. The petrification domain Fire Dance activated had struck both Frost Rain and Chopped Axe. Although their combination skill had mitigated a portion of the damage, they still had very little HP remaining after receiving that attack. Just as Chopped Axe was about to turn around and leave, a yell suddenly entered her ears. "Careful!" This voice originated from the distant Frost Rain. However, before Chopped Axe could figure out what was going on, a stinging sensation came from her chest when she looked down. She noticed the tip of a short sword emerging from her chest. Meanwhile, this short sword was none other than Fire Dance's 1,000 transformations. "How? Weren't you?" Chopped Axe turned around, her eyes filled with confusion. After all, Fire Dance, who should have been dead, was currently standing right behind her. Moreover, the female assassin's HP bar was actually full. Instead of replying immediately, Fire Dance pulled out 1,000 transformations from Chopped Axe, leaving a fountain of blood to pour out of the female berserker's chest as she watched Chopped Axe's HP plummet. She said in a quiet tone, "Your combination attack really is impressive. You two actually forced me to waste one life." When Fire Dance was done speaking, Chopped Axe's HP zeroed out. The berserker's body then collapsed to the ground, a piece of equipment appearing beside her corpse. Meanwhile, upon seeing this scene, Frost Rain hurriedly took out an ancient magic scroll from his bag and activated it, destroying the seal on the battlefield and disappearing before everyone's eyes. As for the other Death God Workshop members, they all fell into a panic at Chopped Axe and Frost Rain's defeat. As a result, Zero Wings members took only a short while to finish them off. At this moment, the Death God Workshop, which had been giving the various large guilds of the fairy country a headache all this time, finally sustained a severe loss for the first time in God's domain. Of the two commanders that fought against Zero Wing, one died while the other fled. As for the other 50+ experts, they suffered annihilation. Chapter 1923. Fame spreading across the fairy country. After the Death God Workshop members' annihilation, varying expressions appeared on the faces of Ninth Heaven's and East Crow's members. "Big Sis Melody, that Fire Dance is amazing. She actually defeated 2 of the Death God Workshop's commanders all by herself. If the rest of the Death God Workshop find out about this, they'll definitely start keeping a low profile when taking action." Scarlet Heart exclaimed excitedly as she watched Fire Dance going through the loot dropped by the Death God Workshop members. The large guilds operating in the fairy country were all powerless to do anything against the Death God Workshop, largely because the Death God Workshop had too many experts. If the guilds dispatched too small of a team to deal with the workshop, their teams would simply end up getting the tables turned on them. But if they sent too large of one, their movements would get noticed very easily, making a successful ambush on the workshop impossible. Take East Crow for example. Had East Crow dispatched an army of several thousand players instead of just a 500-man team this time, Chopped Axe and Frost Rain's team would have most likely received news about the guild's movements and had long since fled to another map. They wouldn't have given East Crow any opportunity to meet them at all. At this stage of the game, only a superpower, which possessed plenty of experts and resources, would be capable of putting the Death God Workshop in its place. However, the various superpowers had plenty of territories that they needed capable people to manage. They simply couldn't afford a protracted battle with the Death God Workshop without hampering their own development as a result. The superpowers had no choice but to ignore the antics of the Death God Workshop so long as the workshop did not cross their bottom lines. However, Zero Wing was different from the various superpowers. The guild possessed experts that were capable of defeating the Death God Workshop's commanders and also had amazing tracking abilities. Even without expending a large amount of manpower and resources, Zero Wing could deal with the Death God Workshop. That's right. After this battle, the Death God Workshop will most likely keep its head down for some time. Melody nodded in agreement. She had never imagined that Zero Wing actually had such frightening strength. The strength the guild had displayed thus far greatly exceeded her expectations. Quickly spread the news that Zero Wing has already agreed to help Ninth Heaven in combating the Death God Workshop. Originally, she had expected Zero Wing to give the Death God Workshop pause, at most, and force the workshop into a stalemate. If that happened, Ninth Heaven would have room to develop. Everything would be fine so long as the guild was not pushed to the brink of collapse. However, the situation was different now. Not only did Zero Wing possess the strength to suppress the Death God Workshop, but Zero Wing also had the ability to ambush the workshop's teams. This outcome was far better than what she initially expected. Once the Death God Workshop learned that Ninth Heaven had partnered with Zero Wing, the workshop would naturally stop seeking trouble with Ninth Heaven out of fear of Zero Wing. "I'll spread the message right away." Upon hearing Melody's words, Scarlet Heart immediately understood Melody's intentions. She also could not help but anticipate the impact the news of the Death God Workshop's defeat would have on the fairy country. The Death God Workshop was akin to a plague to the fairy country. Just the mention of its name would give the various major powers of the country a headache. Following which, Scarlet Heart compiled the information of the battle and published it on the fairy country's official forums. She also had some of her subordinates talk it up in the country's various cities. Meanwhile, Troubled Madness, who stood some distance away from Zero Wing and Ninth Heaven's group, wore an incredulous expression on his face as he looked at Fire Dance and the others. "Who are those people? Why haven't I heard of a guild named Zero Wing before?" At this moment, an indescribable sense of shock filled Troubled Madness's heart. Both Chopped Axe and Frost Rain were monster-like existences, yet, despite working together, they were still no match for Fire Dance. Had Troubled Madness heard about this situation from someone else, he would have most likely dismissed their words as a joke. However, having personally witnessed this battle, he had no choice but to believe it. The final exchange was especially astonishing. He had clearly seen Fire Dance getting killed, yet the female assassin had still managed to mysteriously appear behind Chopped Axe. This was definitely his first time coming across such a strange situation. However, unlike Ninth Heaven's and East Crow's members, Zero Wing's members did not feel particularly surprised by the outcome of Fire Dance's battle with Chopped Axe and Frost Rain. Although Fire Dance did not reveal the details of Thousand Transformations to anyone else, they still knew that Fire Dance possessed the true illusion skill, as they had seen it at work while they were out grinding monsters and bosses. True illusion granted Fire Dance one additional life, though the skill could be used only once every 48 hours. Due to this skill, with the exception of dungeons, Fire Dance had never truly died even once until now. Among Zero Wing's core members, Fire Dance held the nickname of Phoenix due to this skill, as well as the envy of many players. Vice Guild Leader. We just found out some information about Zero Wing. It is an up-and-coming guild that was established at the start of God's domain. Although it doesn't have any background, its strength is not the slightest bit weaker than a first-rate guild's, one of East Crow's members reported hurriedly. The guild's strength rivals a first-rate guild's? Troubled Madness rolled his eyes at his subordinate, feeling that this information was greatly mistaken. After all, the first-rate guilds of the fairy country were utterly helpless against the Death God Workshop, yet Zero Wing, a guild capable of dealing with said workshop, was labeled as a guild that only rivaled first-rate guilds. What did that make the fairy country's 5 first-rate guilds, then? Second-rate guilds. Of course, there was also a huge difference between first-rate guilds. For example, with the combat power Zero Wing had displayed thus far, it should at least be able to rival the best among first-rate guilds. It definitely wasn't an existence that ordinary first-rate guilds like East Crow could compare to. Notify your subordinates to look into the relationship between Ninth Heaven and Zero Wing immediately. Also, before we get a clear picture of their relationship, notify everyone in the guild not to come into conflict with Ninth Heaven's members. Troubled Madness instructed. Although he did not know the full extent of Zero Wing's strength, based on the experts the guild had revealed today, Zero Wing definitely wasn't a guild to be underestimated. It would not be a laughing matter if these experts of Zero Wing made trouble for East Crow out in the fields. Meanwhile, on Fire Dance's side, after they finished going through the loot dropped by the Death God Workshop members, they immediately returned to Forest City to rest. While waiting for the Death God Workshop to make another move, they surveyed the area around the 2 shops Melody promised, as well as gained a deeper understanding of Forest City's situation. This was also one of the tasks Feng had assigned them. After all, as the capital city of a neutral country, its growth potential was limitless. There were also plenty of resources unique to the fairy country. By the time Fire Dance and the others returned to Forest City, Scarlet Heart had long since spread the news of the Death God Workshop's defeat throughout the fairy country. For a time, the entire country was in an uproar. This is a lie, right? That's the Death God Workshop we're talking about. How can anyone possibly ambush the workshop successfully? It's no lie. There is even a video recording uploaded with the forum post. Although the video only shows snippets of the battle, the ones that got defeated are indeed the commanders and members of the Death God Workshop. Moreover, the Death God Workshop hasn't issued any denials up to now, so it must be true. Zero Wing is amazing. It is actually able to ambush and defeat the Death God Workshop's members. I wonder what kind of guild Zero Wing is? Why haven't I heard about it before this incident? It should be a new guild created by some major corporation. Otherwise, how could it possibly be so strong? I wonder if Zero Wing is recruiting neutral players like us. At this point, everyone in the fairy country was talking about the Death God Workshop's defeat and growing curious about Zero Wing's identity. After all, the Death God Workshop was one of the fairy country's overlords. A guild capable of suppressing the workshop definitely wasn't ordinary. Zero Wing's fame quickly spread throughout the fairy country. Meanwhile, inside a luxurious mansion in Forest City. When Frost Rain entered the reception room of this mansion and saw the gentle, old man sitting on one of the sofas there, his expression immediately tensed up in anxiety. Meanwhile, standing beside this old man were 6 people, all of them radiating a frightening aura. Similar to Frost Rain, these 6 people were commanders of the Death God Workshop. Only, their internal ranks were much higher than Frost Rain's. "You've returned?" Sending a glance at Frost Rain, the old man asked calmly, "Well? Out with it. What happened over there?" Chapter 1924. Foundation Investigation. Frost Rain suddenly felt a chill enveloping his entire body at the old man's words. He immediately retold the battle, careful not to miss out on even the slightest detail. "I see." The old man narrowed his eyes as he caressed his white beard. "A guild from Star Moon Kingdom, is it? An outside guild dares meddle in the matters of our Death God Workshop. Chief, why don't I bring a team to take care of them?" A 2.5-meter-tall bearkin berserker said suddenly. The bearkin's suggestion stunned the other commanders present. Among the 8 commanders of the Death God Workshop, the bearkin berserker ranked number 1. Titled the Heavenly Spear by the Secret Pavilion, he was one of the 2 true pillars of the Death God Workshop. While others might not know, it was entirely due to the first commander and chief commander's existence that the various superpowers chose to ignore the Death God Workshop's antics. Otherwise, with the strength the various superpowers possessed, they would have long since taken care of the Death God Workshop. Yet now, one of the Death God Workshop's pillars was proposing to take action himself. The other commanders present were naturally surprised by this situation. "Forget it. We'll stop harassing Ninth Heaven temporarily. We'll decide how we should proceed after we have conducted a thorough investigation of Zero Wing," the old man said, shaking his head. "Moreover, even if we don't take action, Zero Wing will still encounter a lot of trouble from this point onward. The waters of the fairy country are much deeper than they think." Meanwhile, the Death God Workshop's lack of response to its crushing defeat fueled Zero Wing's fame to greater heights in Forest City. In just one day, a large number of players already wanted to join Zero Wing. Unfortunately, as Zero Wing had no intention to establish a branch guild in Forest City at the moment, these interested players could not help but sigh in disappointment. However, the businesses Zero Wing had set up in the 2 shops Melody had traded were booming with popularity. Many of the potions and engineering tools sold by the Candlelight trading firm were very much welcomed by Forest City's players. For example, the exotic stamina potion. As there weren't many towns and cities in the fairy country, there were very few teleportation points. Meanwhile, with the guilds occupying most of the nearby resource areas, independent players had no choice but to grind in distant maps. Due to these factors, independent players had to expend a lot of stamina just on travel, a situation that further increased the demand for the exotic stamina potion. In addition, as Zero Wing held exclusive rights to the exotic stamina potion, Candlelight shops were the only source of the potion, which the independent players and guild players of Forest City were frantically purchasing. As for the selling price, it was much higher than that of the potions sold in Star Moon Kingdom. In just one day, after deducting material costs and labor costs, the 2 shops set up in Forest City earned Zero Wing over 5,000 gold. Candlelight's shops here were much more profitable than those in White River City. Melody also found the exotic stamina potion very tempting. Hence, she asked to purchase the potion in bulk from Zero Wing. However, as the Candlelight trading firm could produce only a limited number of exotic stamina potions each day, even if Zero Wing wished to sell the potions in bulk, it couldn't. In the end, after Ninth Heaven negotiated with Melancholic Smile, It was decided that the candlelight trading firm would supply the guild with a fixed number of exotic stamina potions each day. In exchange, Ninth Heaven would supply Zero Wing with materials unique to the fairy country. A few examples of materials unique to the fairy country were fairy fruit and fairy wood. Both were extremely rare materials. Fairy fruit could be used to make all kinds of beverages. Not only could fairy fruits enhance the taste of a beverage, but they also provided a sobering effect, which allowed players to focus better when working. To lifestyle players, beverages made using fairy fruit were akin to wonder drugs. Fairy wood was even more special. It could be used to make furniture and ships. Furniture made using fairy wood carried mana, which, in turn, increased the mana density of the furniture's surroundings. Meanwhile, when used to produce ships, fairy wood would increase the ship's durability. These two materials might not be particularly useful to current players and guilds, but as players reached higher levels, these two materials would likewise appreciate in value. This was especially true for furniture made using fairy wood, which was something all lifestyle players sought. Although such furniture would not improve the production success rate, the increased mana density would help lifestyle players concentrate better. This was also the main reason why Xueqi had tasked Fire Dance and the others with setting up shops in Forest City to purchase a large amount of fairy fruits and fairy wood. Now that Zero Wing had Ninth Heaven's help as well, the collection of these materials would proceed even faster. Meanwhile, a group of cloaked players suddenly arrived in Star Moon Kingdom's Zero Wing City. These cloaked players had thoroughly hidden their appearances. However, the fierce aura they radiated still made other players avoid them like the plague. If a player with a high-ranking identification skill were to inspect these players, they would definitely be very surprised because these cloaked players were not part of the human race but of neutral races. In total, there were 50 players in this group, every one of them a Tier 2 player. This was almost as many Tier 2 players as a first-rate guild possessed at this stage of the game. The one leading this group of neutral players was a level 58, Tier 2 Tigerkin Ranger. Meanwhile, moving alongside him were a male half-elf and a female Tigerkin. The latter two were none other than Frost Rain and Chopped Axe, commanders of the Death God Workshop. So this place is Zero Wing City. The mana density here is so high. Why are there so many players here? The Death God Workshop's members were filled with surprise as they observed the crowded streets of the city. Although they had seen NPC cities with much higher player populations, this was their first time seeing a guild town or city with so many players. Moreover, a considerable portion of these players were experts. There were also plenty of Tier 2 players roaming about the city. The situation here was completely different from any guild town they had visited before. However, the most surprising aspect of Zero Wing City was still its mana density, which greatly surpassed even the fairy country's most mana-dense area. Alright, enough sightseeing. Our goal here isn't to tour Zero Wing City, the Tigerkin Ranger said in a cold voice. We only have one goal this time, and that is to get a clear idea of Zero Wing's strength. The Chief Commander has also stated that, if need be, we should exhibit a portion of our strength to let Zero Wing know that the Death God Workshop's reputation is not for show. Frost and Axe, that goes double for you too. If you don't perform well, you should know what kind of person the Chief Commander is. When Frost Rain and Chopped Axe heard the Ranger's words and thought about the Chief Commander's means of doing things, their bodies shuddered involuntarily. They couldn't offer any rebuttals to Light Cloud, the Tigerkin Ranger. While part of the reason for this was the intense aura he gave off, another part was him being the second-ranked commander in the Death God Workshop. In terms of combat standards, Light Cloud far surpassed the two of them. The other Death God Workshop members also nodded silently and sorted out their emotions. They immediately followed Light Cloud to investigate Zero Wing's residence. When the group arrived on the top floor of a high-class restaurant adjacent to Zero Wing's residence, Light Cloud used a high-ranking identification skill to observe the situation inside the residence. However, the moment Light Cloud did so, he fell into a daze. This was because 500 Tier 2 players stood in the residence's front courtyard at this moment. Meanwhile, even the weakest piece of equipment these players wore was level 50 fine gold rank, while the majority of these players sported level 50 dark gold equipment. Currently, these 500 Tier 2 players were standing at attention before a man. When Light Cloud tried identifying this man, he could not see any information about him aside from his name, Black Flame. Even so, he could distinctly feel an indescribable sense of danger from the man even from several hundred yards away. Cloud, What's the situation inside Zero Wing's residence? Frost Rain and Chopped Axe could not help but ask curiously after Light Cloud remained silent for a long time. Chapter 1925. Frightening Numbers. Despite hearing Frost Rain and Chopped Axe's question, Light Cloud remained completely silent as he stared at the rows of Tier 2 players inside Zero Wing's residence. How is this possible? Is Zero Wing really just equal to a first-rate guild? This thought echoed continuously in Light Cloud's mind. 500 Tier 2 players. To the current first-rate guilds, this number was beyond impossible to achieve. Even the Death God Workshop had only a little over 60 Tier 2 players right now. If the workshop started a fight against Zero Wing, just the numerical advantage alone would let the guild run roughshod over the Death God Workshop. In the Fairy Country, although the various first-rate guilds each had more Tier 2 players than the Death God Workshop, the difference wasn't much. Hence, the Death God Workshop was not afraid of conducting guerrilla warfare against them. Including experts like the 8 commanders, the workshop held a considerable advantage when fighting out in the fields. However, the methods the Death God Workshop employed against these first-rate guilds would be absolutely useless against Zero Wing. After all, the disparity in the number of Tier 2 players each organization possessed was nearly tenfold. Even if Zero Wing divided its Tier 2 experts, the guild could still form sizable groups that would pose a formidable fighting force. Not to mention, unlike the various first-rate guilds, Zero Wing had experts that could rival the commanders of the Death God Workshop. If the Death God Workshop really started fighting against Zero Wing in the Fairy Country, even with the home ground advantage, the workshop wouldn't have it easy. Frost, Axe, you two stay here with me. Everyone else, return to base, Light Cloud commanded after giving the matter some more thought. Only the 3 of us are staying behind? Frost Rain was confused as he looked at Light Cloud. The chief commander specifically sent these people to help us. If all of them return, what can the 3 of us possibly achieve here? Aside from scouting out Zero Wing's strength, the chief commander had also implicitly suggested they make trouble for Zero Wing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dispatched so many Tier 2 experts for a simple reconnaissance operation. The other Death God Workshop members agreed with Frost Rain's words. They all expressed their confusion over Light Cloud's decision, unable to understand why they had to return to base shortly after arriving in Zero Wing City. With their group of Tier 2 experts, they could cause even more destruction than a large guild's 1,000-man expert legion. Do you know how many Tier 2 experts are currently in Zero Wing's residence? Light Cloud asked as he shifted his gaze to Frost Rain. Tier 2 experts? Seeing as this is Zero Wing's main headquarters, there should be a couple of dozen, I guess? Frost Rain replied after giving the matter some thought. Currently, even first-rate guilds had only a little over 100 Tier 2 experts. Meanwhile, having half of this number stationed in the guild's main headquarters could already be considered excessive. A couple of dozen? Light Cloud stared at Frost Rain in disdain upon hearing this answer. If there were only a couple of dozen, do you think I'd order a retreat? Could there be over 100? Chopped Axe asked, somewhat surprised. Wrong. It's 500. Light Cloud replied as he spread his right hand wide. 500? How can that be possible? Isn't Zero Wing just an equal of first-rate guilds? Did you see wrong? Frost Rain instinctively rejected Light Cloud's statement. This number was no laughing matter. If Zero Wing really had 500 Tier 2 experts, it could already rival some of the weaker superpowers. I wish I had seen wrong, Light Cloud said, a bitter smile appearing on his face. However, I have already used my identification skill to double-check several times. All 500 of them are indeed Tier 2. Didn't they say that Zero Wing doesn't have any backers? Chopped Axe said, horrified. If Zero Wing had 500 Tier 2 experts, then taking care of their team of 50 Tier 2 players would be child's play. Most likely, aside from the 3 commanders present, everyone else would die if they tried fighting against 500 Tier 2 experts. She found it truly hard to believe that Ninth Heaven, a second-rate guild that had no backers whatsoever, had managed to partner up with a titan like Zero Wing. With this, the Death God Workshop really had to consider carefully whether to continue targeting Ninth Heaven or not. We're changing plans. From now on, the 3 of us will continue scouting out Zero Wing. Try to avoid butting heads with Zero Wing as much as possible, Light Cloud said. I'll also personally report this matter to the chief commander, so everyone else should return to base now. Obedient to Light Cloud's instructions, the other Death God Workshop members scattered and returned to the fairy country. Meanwhile, inside a luxurious mansion in Forest City, Silent Autumn, the Death God Workshop's chief commander, who is currently holding a meeting with the workshop's various commanders, received a report from Light Cloud. 500 Tier 2 players? Silent Autumn, who was caressing his beard, froze when he read the contents of the report. Although he had long since expected Zero Wing to be extraordinary since the guild dared to intervene in the Death God Workshop's affairs, he had never thought that the guild would be extraordinary to such an extent. It seems we'll have to shelve our plans for the moment. Chief Commander, what about our partnership with those people? The several commanders seated before Silent Autumn asked worriedly. Those people won't stop their plans just because of us. If we miss out on this opportunity, there is always money to be made. However, oftentimes, one wrong move could potentially end our lives. Silent Autumn replied, waving his hand. He still decided to play the spectator in this matter for the moment. Notify the ones below to maintain a low profile for now. We can also use this opportunity to determine whether Zero Wing has the ability to set foot into our territory. I believe it won't be long before we find out one way or another. There's no need for us to grow anxious. Meanwhile, inside Zero Wing's residence, Xueqi remained ignorant of the fact that his gathering 500 Tier 2 members to raid Island had prompted the Death God Workshop to abandon the thought of taking revenge on Zero Wing, and even some of its development plans. Guild leader, all manpower and resources are gathered. On Thunder Island's side, the Phoenix Pavilion has already made all the necessary arrangements. We can set off at any time, Aqua Rose reported as she approached Xueqi. Nodding, Xueqi said, all right. Have everyone teleport to Thunder Island now. Traveling to Island was not an easy task. The island's location in the Sea of Death's inner area meant players would come across many dangers on the way there. Even a small mistake could be fatal. Moreover, although Xueqi knew that Island housed a manatite vein, he had very little understanding in regard to everything else. Hence, he needed Phoenix Rain's forces to guide him there. After all, Phoenix Rain had been operating in the Sea of Death all this time. Her familiarity with the Sea of Death was definitely superior to his. She would help him avoid many unnecessary dangers. Following which, Zero Wing's members started teleporting to Thunder Island using a guild transfer scroll. Upon arriving in the city on Thunder Island, Zero Wing's members could not help but gasp in shock. Their reaction was because the city on Thunder Island was like heaven on earth. Not only was the scenery here mesmerizing, but there was also a frightening number of players in the streets of the city. Even imperial capitals could not compete with this city in prosperity. Level 56 players and above could be seen roaming all around. Many players here had even reached level 58 already. Even Xueqi was somewhat surprised by this situation. He had never thought that Thunder Island had already developed to such an extent. Meanwhile, under Blue Phoenix's guidance, Zero Wing's members soon arrived at Thunder Island's harbor. Currently, thousands of speedboats and warships could be seen docked there, the scene simply jaw-dropping. Just as Blue Phoenix was about to bring Zero Wing's members to the speedboat she had prepared for the trip to the Sea of Death's inner area, a Dragon Phoenix Pavilion member suddenly ran over. Big Sis Blue, bad news. The Pavilion Master found the legacy left behind on Savage God Island, but information about it got out somehow, and her team ended up surrounded by Miracle's forces. Currently, Miracle has already blocked off the entire island. Although we immediately tried to deploy reinforcements, 9 Dragons Emperor's people are deliberately making trouble for us, preventing us from using the guild's warship to save the Pavilion Master. Damn it! 9 Dragons Emperor must have leaked the information to Miracle to spoil our plans. Upon hearing her subordinate's report, Blue Phoenix could not help but frown in anxiety. The terrain on Savage God Island was slightly unusual. Players could use neither return scrolls nor instantaneous movement scrolls on the island. Meanwhile, entry to the island was possible only by ship. If the entire island was blocked off, the only way out was by carving a path of blood. Meanwhile, the members Phoenix Rain had brought to Savage God Island this time were all experts of the Phoenix Pavilion. Their annihilation would deal a severe blow to the Phoenix Pavilion. Guild leader Black Flame, due to this emergency, I'll have to postpone our trip for now. I need to quickly organize a fleet and head over to Savage God Island. I hope that you can understand, Blue Phoenix said anxiously as she looked at Xueqi. Something happened on Savage God Island? Xueqi was startled by Blue Phoenix's words. As far as he remembered, Savage God Island was not something that should appear at this stage of the game. He nodded and said, "Since the Phoenix Pavilion Master is in trouble, it is only natural to postpone this matter. As allies, is there anything we can do to help?" Chapter 1926. Hell has no doors. Guild leader Black Flame is willing to help us? Wonderful. Blue Phoenix rejoiced when she heard Xueqi's offer. Although Zero Wing had not focused on its development on Thunder Island and had only conducted some business there, the naval forces the guild possessed still should not be underestimated. The one-horned sailboat, in particular, a bronze small sailboat that Zero Wing revealed during the struggle for Thunder Island, was something that the various superpowers still sought to obtain even now. After all, although the superpowers' naval forces had improved a lot since the struggle of Thunder Island, the one-horned sailboat remained a force to be reckoned with. Following which, while organizing a fleet to head towards Savage God Island, Blue Phoenix filled Xueqi in on their rescue operation this time. In order to monopolize the legacy ruin on Savage God Island, Miracle had dispatched 3 of its fleets, each of which had over 100 ships. With the 3 fleets, Miracle was able to surround Savage God Island and seal off all possible exit points. Originally, with the naval forces the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had developed during this period, it would have been very easy to break through a blockade like this. However, due to 9 Dragons Emperor's interference, Phoenix Rain couldn't mobilize the common warship the pavilion had recently acquired after much difficulty. Although warships were no match for speedboats and sailboats in terms of speed, they were specialized for combat, their combat power far superior to even that of sailboats out at sea. This warship was the reason why the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion succeeded in stabilizing its position on Thunder Island. With the current predicament happening so suddenly, most of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's fleets were out of position, off doing their own quests very far away from Savage God Island. Even if these fleets were to head over to Savage God Island now, by the time they arrived, Phoenix Rain's group would have long since been killed by Miracle. The only fleet they could mobilize was the one the pavilion had stationed to garrison Thunder Island. Guild leader Black Flame, I hope that you can help us distract a part of Miracle's forces. You don't have to fight them head-on. It is fine so long as you can distract 1 fleet's worth of ships. With that, my side will be able to break through the encirclement and rescue the Pavilion Masters group. Blue Phoenix briefed Xueqi on the plan as she took out a sea map. As long as they could group up with Phoenix Rain's forces, Miracle would have a hard time doing anything against them. Then, all they would have to do was buy time until the pavilion's other fleets arrived. At which point, Miracle would naturally give up on targeting Phoenix Rain. After all, if the fleets of their 2 superpowers truly started a fight with each other, all they would achieve was harm to themselves, benefiting the other superpowers occupying Thunder Island. My side only needs to split one of their fleets away? After giving the matter some thought, Xueqi nodded and said, "That won't be a problem. We'll do our best to keep them busy for as long as possible." The appearance of Savage God Island was a huge event. He naturally had to go and take a look. During his previous life, he had only heard about Savage God Island. Savage God Island was both a secret land and a drifting island. Rumor had it that there were legacies and treasures left behind on the island. Reality had indeed proven these claims true. Regardless if it were legacies or treasures, both could allow a guild's strength to skyrocket. However, Savage God Island had only appeared for a short period in the past. By the time the various large guilds had shifted their focus to the sea, Savage God Island had long since become a legend. In the end, only the superpowers back then had managed to gain some harvest from it. "I'll have to trouble guild leader Black Flame then," Blue Phoenix said sincerely. By the time Blue Phoenix was done hashing out a rescue plan, her fleet was also ready to set off. She immediately commanded her fleet to depart for Savage God Island. The appearance of Blue Phoenix's fleet stunned many of the adventurer teams that had recently arrived on Thunder Island. Her fleet had 100 ships in total. Among them, more than 50 were advanced speedboats, 8 were bronze speedboats, 2 were mysterious iron speedboats, and 2 were common small sailboats, a very powerful fleet even in the Sea of Death. Compared to the fleets the adventurer teams normally came across, the difference was like heaven and earth. The usual fleets only had 5 or 6 bronze speedboats and 30 or so advanced speedboats, with the rest being ordinary speedboats. In reality, The adventurer teams that had recently arrived on Thunder Island weren't the only ones surprised by the fleet Blue Phoenix prepared. Even Xueqi was surprised at this sight. He had never thought that Phoenix Rain had already expanded her naval forces to such a level. Moreover, this was only one of several fleets under Phoenix Rain's command. Of course, a fleet used to garrison Thunder Island naturally needed to be excellent, as this was a show of the guild's strength. At the same time, this garrisoned fleet could be used during emergencies. Even so, from looking at Blue Phoenix's fleet, Xueqi could already tell just how frightening the naval forces Phoenix Rain currently possessed. Upon seeing Blue Phoenix's fleet leave the harbor, Xueqi took out the Swift Dragon speedboat, 2 bronze speedboats, over a dozen advanced speedboats, 1 common sailboat, and the one-horned sailboat to ferry the 500 Zero-Wing members he brought with him. Although the number of ships in his fleet was far from a match for Blue Phoenix's fleet, his fleet's overall combat power was still enough to make the various adventurer teams wandering around the harbor gawk at his fleet enviously. Zero-Wing's fleet is amazing. Big Sis Blue. This is wonderful. With our strength and 0 wings, we'll have no problem breaking through Miracle's encirclement. A level 57, Tier 2 female cleric on one of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's common sailboats exclaimed in surprise and joy when she saw Zero-Wing's fleet. This is only natural. Back during the struggle for Thunder Island, Zero-Wing's fleet was already something that the various superpowers envied. Although Zero-Wing is currently unable to focus on its naval development due to a bunch of matters, its naval strength is still not to be underestimated. Blue Phoenix nodded. This was also the reason why she was so happy that Xueqi was willing to help them out. After traveling for a little over 3 hours, Blue Phoenix and Xueqi's group finally saw an island enveloped by dark fog on the horizon. This island was none other than Savage God Island. Currently, the entirety of Savage God Island was surrounded by a large number of ships. However, after Blue Phoenix took a rough glance at these ships, her complexion darkened immediately. How is this possible? Her expression turned incomparably gloomy when she saw the ships anchored at Savage God Island. Miracle only dispatched 3 fleets? That was an outright lie. At this moment, there were more than 500 ships around Savage God Island. In other words, a total of 5 fleets were present. Moreover, just the small sailboats she could see from this distance numbered as many as 7, with mysterious iron speedboats numbering more than 10. Even Miracle's Pride, the giant crocodile warship, was here. Meanwhile, after noticing the appearance of Blue Phoenix's and Xueqi's fleets, these ships quickly went into action and started forming an encirclement around the 2 fleets. Vice Guild Leader Miles, just like you guessed, the fleet the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion used to garrison Thunder Island has arrived. However, according to the report we received, it would seem that Zero-Wing's fleet is also participating in the rescue operation this time. Zero-Wing's fleet has 2 sailboats and several excellent speedboats. A Tier 2 ranger, the captain of one of Miracle's small sailboats, reported as he looked at Xueqi's fleet. Should we alter our original plans? Zero-Wing. 1,000 Miles smiled when he heard this. This is interesting. Originally, I only planned on damaging and plundering Phoenix Rain's first fleet, but since Zero-Wing has also joined the fray, we'll take Zero-Wing's ships too. Notify the Water Ghost Legion to start the assault. He was very familiar with Zero-Wing's one-horned sailboat. However, after the Thunder Island event, Zero-Wing no longer operated in the Sea of Death. As a result, the one-horned sailboat also disappeared from everyone's eyes. Now that the one-horned sailboat reappeared, he could use this opportunity to take it for himself. Zero-Wing's naval strength might have been frightening during the struggle on Thunder Island, but times had changed. The one-horned sailboat's combat power was no longer a threat to Miracle. Understood, the ranger captain said excitedly, his eyes shining with greed as he looked at Blue Phoenix's and Xueqi's fleets. The operation this time was a huge jackpot. In anticipation of this moment, the Water Ghost Legion he led had been constantly honing itself in secret. Unlike legions that operated on land, the Water Ghost Legion specialized in naval combat. Every member of the Legion had acquired a sea-based legacy. Their combat power far surpassed normal players when at sea. Before them, a ship was no different from a stationary target, including the firepower of 5 fleets worth of ships. Annihilating an expert fleet was a piece of cake. Retreat! Everyone, leave this sea zone as quickly as possible. Blue Phoenix commanded hurriedly upon seeing Miracle's fleet mobilizing. The difference in strength between the 2 sides was clear for all to see. Fighting against a fleet of such a size and caliber was simply suicidal. The only thing they could do now was retreat. However, in terms of speed, Miracle's ships obviously had the upper hand. Very quickly, Miracle's ships completed their encirclement of Blue Phoenix's and Xueqi's fleets. Shortly after, a gigantic, dark gray warship stopped a short distance from the sailboat Blue Phoenix rode. The level 58, Tier 2 Ranger standing on this warship's deck smiled as he looked at Blue Phoenix and said, "Blue Phoenix, long time no see. Although I lost to you in our previous battle, this time, I'll have you hand over all your ships to me. Or do you want me to slaughter every one of your men before taking your ships? I'm fine either way." Blue Phoenix's expression turned even uglier when she saw this level 58, Tier 2 Ranger. The man's name was Wild Aggression, and he was the commander of one of Miracle's trump card legions. Recently, Wild Aggression had obtained a sea-based advanced legacy. Now, his strength out at sea was far stronger than his strength on land. His appearance here also meant that their chances of defeating Miracle's forces this time had become even smaller. "Since you're not willing to make a decision, I'll choose for you." Sending a glance at the Water Ghost Legion members behind him, Wild Aggression pointed forward and said, "Go. Kill them all. But make sure not to damage my new ships. As for the items they drop, finders keepers." Chapter 1927. King of the Seas. Retreat. All ships maintain a distance from the enemy and break through the encirclement with everything you have. Absolutely do not let enemy ships close in on you. Blue Phoenix commanded hurriedly when she saw the approaching bronze and mysterious iron speedboats. The attacks of ships had very long cooldowns. Moreover, while these attacks were effective against sea monsters, they were not as effective against players. After all, the attacks of ships were very monotonous with long preparation times. Expert players could easily avoid them. Hence, if a ship allowed enemy players to get close, it would no longer be able to exert its might. Then, the outcome of the fight would be decided by a fight between the players of both sides. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had received a report stating that Miracle had obtained a secret sea-based legacy and had used said legacy to nurture a large group of experts specialized in naval combat, which was very likely to be the Legion Wild Aggression led. Otherwise, Wild Aggression would have no reason to close the distance between their two guilds' fleets and waste time on a battle between players. Rather than risk dying to random cannon fire, it would be much better for Miracle's ships to simply bombard them with their own cannons. Although doing so would damage the pavilion's ships and reduce the harvest Miracle could gain, this method was comparatively safer. Under Blue Phoenix's command, the pavilion's ships maintained a steady bombardment while simultaneously keeping their distance from Miracle's ships. For a time, the Water Ghost Legion speedboats couldn't approach the pavilion's ships at all. "What a bunch of slippery eels. You sure know how to run away." Whenever the Water Ghost Legion speedboats got too close, Blue Phoenix's ships would accurately launch a round of attacks that forced the Legion's speedboats to either reduce their speed or swerve to avoid the attacks. This, in turn, opened the distance between the two fleets. You wish to escape? Try it if you can. We have long since set up a magic barrier around this area. Not a single one of you should think of leaving this place alive. Wild Aggression bellowed in rage when he saw that the distance between their two guilds' fleets was not shortening at all. Activate the magic array. Following Wild Aggression's command, walls of ice suddenly started emerging from the ocean surface, blocking off the direction Blue Phoenix's and Xueqi's fleets were heading. The ice walls were over a dozen meters tall and several meters thick. Moreover, they kept expanding into the surroundings. It was simply impossible for the ships to break through this barrier. The glacier seal? Xueqi felt a little surprised when he saw the gigantic ice barrier forming a distance away from his fleet. The glacier seal was the product of the glacier orb, a rare magical tool meant for naval combat. However, activating the glacier seal required 100 glacier orbs. Moreover, each activation cost 10,000 magic crystals. Once activated, the glacier seal would lock down a 5,000-yard radius for 30 minutes. Only small sailboats ranked Secret Silver or higher and warships at Mysterious Iron and above could break through the glacier seal. All ships gather together. Do not engage the enemy by yourself. Make sure to operate in two-man units or more. Blue Phoenix understood that escape was already impossible. Now that they had been cornered, the only thing they could do was concentrate their forces and hope for the best. Moreover, Players could not use return scrolls while on a ship. Only after jumping into the ocean could they use one. However, return scrolls had very long activation times. If they tried something like that, miracle ships would shoot them like fish in a barrel. Hence, their only choice was to fight to the death. Guild leader Black Flame, I am truly sorry for this, Blue Phoenix said, looking at Xueqi apologetically. Later on, my fleet will delay Miracle for as long as possible, so you should store away a portion of your ships. Once the ice barrier is gone, you can try to use those remaining ships to flee this place. At that time, Miracle will most likely not bother to give chase. After saying so, Blue Phoenix quickly had her ships fall into a defensive formation, separating Miracle's fleet from Zero Wing's fleet entirely. With this, if Miracle wanted to target Zero Wing, it would have to go through her ships first. Do you think our Water Ghost Legion will let Zero Wing's members escape? A level 57, Tier 2 Berserker, who was a team leader from the Water Ghost Legion, sneered. Use instantaneous movement scrolls to break through the defensive line. Prioritize killing all of Zero Wing's members. Let's see what the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion can do about it. After this team leader said so, a 100-man team from the Water Ghost Legion immediately used instantaneous movement scrolls after arriving at a location a short distance away from Blue Phoenix's ships. In the blink of an eye, this 100-man team broke through the defensive perimeter Blue Phoenix erected and appeared above Zero Wing's one-horned sailboat drawing their weapons. These Water Ghost Legion members revealed sinister smiles. Meanwhile, the Berserker team leader unsheathed the blood-stained greatsword slung on his back. When he did so, a faint layer of water vapor appeared around it. This was none other than the power of the sea-based legacy he had acquired. Tier 2 passive skill, Flowing Water Blade. So long as the owner of this skill was in a sea zone, the skill would increase their strength by 30%, attack speed by 40%, and attack range by 50%. Zero Wing, it's time to put an end to your game of friendship with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Who'll be the first to die to my blade? The Tier 2 Berserker, Spirit Ox, said, grinning sinisterly as he glanced at the Zero Wing members before him. However, just as the Water Ghost Legion members thought that they would get to watch their team leader start a slaughter and were about to let out a cheer, a faint blue streak of light suddenly passed through the space where Spirit Ox stood. In the next moment, his tall and muscular body split in half, the top half sliding smoothly into the ocean below and disappearing with a splash of seawater. At this moment, it was as if the entire world had frozen over as silence filled the battlefield. The Water Ghost Legion members standing on the one-horned sailboat's deck couldn't utter a single word as they gaped at their team leader's bisected body, their eyes as wide as saucers. Even the level 50 fine gold chest armor their team leader was proud of had been cut through cleanly, the cut surface as smooth as a mirror. A short moment later, blood started spewing out from the lower half of Spirit Ox's body, dyeing the entire deck he stood on in crimson. You people sure speak a lot of nonsense. Didn't you want to fight? Come at me together then. Aqua Rose, who was clad in dark blue robes and held an aqua blue crystalline staff, said with an indifferent expression. Team leader Ox got instant killed. Is she a monster? I didn't even see her chant an incantation. How did she cast such a powerful spell? Everyone, don't be afraid. That kind of spell must be a sure kill spell. She should not be able to use it again within a short while. Besides, even if she is a monster, we're out at sea right now. This is our playing field. If we work together, there is no way we'll lose to one person. Right. Even sea monsters are no match for us. Kill. Let Zero Wing know the might of the Water Ghost Legion. The Water Ghost Legion members present were all experts of Miracle. Moreover, they had all obtained a sea-based legacy. Setting aside their combat power on land, they were confident that they could contend against even peak experts with ordinary classes when fighting out at sea. After regaining their fighting spirit, over a dozen ranged players bombarded Aqua Rose with attacks. Immediately, spells and arrows flew at Aqua Rose one after another, every one of these attacks containing power at the peak of Tier 2. A Tier 2 metric tons of the same level would not survive such a bombardment easily, not to mention a Magicka class player. As long as an attack landed, Aqua Rose would sustain heavy injuries, even if she did not die. At the same time, over a dozen melee players started moving toward Aqua Rose from two different sides. If she tried to dodge the ranged attacks, her defense would definitely lapse. They could then take advantage of that opening to kill her.
However, Aqua Rose held her ground and simply watched quietly as the numerous spells and arrows flew toward her.
Is she suicidal? Doesn't she know that these spells and arrows are buffed by the ocean's power? Just as the approaching melee players were wondering why Aqua Rose was not reacting to the incoming attacks, the spells and arrows actually started disappearing after getting within half a yard of her. It looked as if something was devouring these attacks one after another. A magic barrier? Impossible! The power of those attacks is at the peak of Tier 2. Even if she used a Tier 2 magic barrier, there is no way she can stop all those attacks without suffering any damage. Just as the Water Ghost Legion members were wondering what was going on, Aqua Rose tapped the butt of her staff on the deck. The water barrier surrounding her promptly expanded, transforming instantly into a 10-meter-tall tsunami, which then devoured every Water Ghost Legion member standing on the one-horned sailboat. Even Tier 2 MTs were utterly powerless in the face of the tsunami. After getting devoured by the towering wave, everyone's HP fell to zero in no more than 2 seconds. In the blink of an eye, all 100 Water Ghost Legion members were killed, leaving behind a bunch of ownerless weapons and equipment on the deck. Chapter 1928. Tier 3 Combat Power. When the Water Ghost Legion members on the one-horned sailboat were annihilated, the other Water Ghost Legion members, who were fighting Blue Phoenix's forces, could not help but gasp. Isn't the opponent only a single person? How did they get killed so easily? She must have used a powerful spell. Even Tier 2 MTs didn't survive her attack. Did she use some kind of over-tier spell? Questions flooded the Water Ghost Legion members' minds as they looked at Aqua Rose. Due to their sea-based legacies, both their attack power and defense were greatly enhanced when fighting at sea. In addition, their combat standards were superior to ordinary experts. Overall, their Tier 2 members should be able to contend against peak experts. However, Aqua Rose had still killed the several Tier 2 members, who were part of the 100-man assault team, instantly. What are you all afraid of? The enemy is just one person. Since fighting her at close range is impossible, then switch to ranged attacks. She is bound to run out of mana and stamina sooner or later. Wild Aggression barked strictly, a slight frown forming on his face. While Aqua Rose's strength did indeed make it more difficult for them to wipe out Zero Wing's forces, they still had an absolute advantage in numbers. The outcome of this battle wouldn't change just because of one person. After Wild Aggression finished speaking, another 100-man team from the Water Ghost Legion teleported to the one-horned sailboat. Obedient to Wild Aggression's command, several dozen ranged players started attacking Aqua Rose from a distance. Although Aqua Rose's spells were powerful, she would have difficulty retaliating when targeted by so many attacks. Moreover, with such a great distance between them, dodging her single-target spells would be much easier. Suddenly, over 100 projectiles flew at Aqua Rose from multiple directions. At this time, however, Aqua Rose completed incanting a spell. Opening her eyes, she said, "Go!" Following which, a gigantic ball of water formed above her head, then shot out countless jets of water that struck down every projectile sent at her. Dozens of water jets also flew at the Water Ghost Legion members. The water jets were so fast that they even broke the sound barrier. In the blink of an eye, the jets arrived before the Water Ghost Legion members. Tier 2 spell, Rising Flow. Shill, shill, shill. Although the Water God Legion members tried to block or dodge the water jets as soon as they noticed the attacks, the water jets were simply too fast. In addition, the water jets were so powerful that they even pierced through the ice walls, which a few elementalists had managed to erect in time, and the players standing behind the ice walls. Players struck by the water jets died instantly. When the few surviving Water Ghost Legion members, who managed to dodge the water jets in time, saw their companions collapsing, fear surfaced in their eyes. However, while these Water Ghost Legion members were in a daze, Aqua Rose launched another wave of attacks at them. This time, though, she controlled the movements of the water jets, so they no longer attacked in a monotonous pattern. Facing water jets that came at them from multiple directions, the Water Ghost Legion members had no choice but to defend themselves, as evasion was no longer possible. However, the power of the water jets easily penetrated whatever defenses they raised. In the blink of an eye, the second 100-man team the Water Ghost Legion sent to deal with Zero Wing was annihilated. How is that possible? The other Water Ghost Legion members, who were watching the battle from afar, grew fearful and anxious as they looked at Aqua Rose. In the short span of time since the battle began, 200 members of Miracle's prided naval legion had gotten killed already, which was simply a nightmare. Moreover, this nightmare still showed no signs of ending anytime soon, as Aqua Rose used an instantaneous movement scroll and teleported herself between the Water Ghost Legions and Blue Phoenix's clashing forces after killing the second 100-man team. She then promptly started casting a spells. Do you really think you're invincible in naval combat? Wild Aggression could no longer sit still after seeing Aqua Rose appear boldly before him. He swiftly retrieved the aqua blue longbow slung on his back and simultaneously fired several dozen icy blue arrows at her. Die! Every arrow carried power at the peak of Tier 2. Several dozen of them intertwined could heavily injure even a great lord of the same level. Moreover, the arrows also moved faster when intertwined. Like a lightning bolt, they crossed the distance of 80 yards or so almost instantly. When the other Water Ghost Legion members saw this move, they breathed out an involuntary sigh of relief. Their commander was finally taking action. This move was originally only a Tier 2 skill. However, when used at sea, its power would be enhanced significantly. Moreover, Wild Aggression had combined a combat technique with the skill, increasing the skill's power even further. Even Tier 2 MTs of the same level would be killed instantly if they tried stopping this attack head-on. However, just as the arrows were about to land on Aqua Rose, a 3-layered water barrier suddenly appeared before her like a blooming lotus flower. Boom! When the arrows struck the water barrier, they tore through the first layer easily. However, when they reached the second layer they stopped cold. Along with the appearance of the water barrier, 12 angry water serpents had also surfaced from the ocean around Aqua Rose, each serpent over a dozen meters tall. Like rampaging sea monsters, they let loose a deafening roar. Immediately, the players near Aqua Rose felt an indescribable pressure weighing on their bodies, both their attributes and physique decreasing continuously. Who are you? Wild Aggression's eyes were wide with astonishment when he saw that Aqua Rose remained completely unharmed after receiving his attack. That was a skill enhanced by the power of the sea. How can a Tier 2 player like you possibly stop it? Enhanced by the sea? Indifferently, Aqua Rose said. Do you think you're the only one who managed to obtain a seed-based legacy? So that's the case. It's no wonder you're so strong. Wild Aggression immediately came to a realization. Licking his lips in excitement and anticipation, he continued, Originally, I thought that this would be a boring job. But since you are also an expert with a sea-based legacy, I will finally get a chance to stretch my body properly. After saying so, Wild Aggression activated a berserk skill, his aura skyrocketing in intensity. The increased mana flow around his body also roiled the ocean's surface. At this moment, the vibe the ranger gave off made it seem as if he was a primordial sea monster that had just awoken from its slumber, inspiring an indescribable sense of fear in others. The boss is finally getting serious. With this, both the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Zero Wing are dead for sure. The Water Ghost Legion members grew excited when they saw the change in Wild Aggression's aura. The Berserk skill Wild Aggression had just activated was a legacy Berserk skill. Although its duration was very short, when used at sea, the effects of the Berserk skill greatly surpassed those of ordinary Berserk skills. At this moment, the ranger was not the slightest bit weaker than a Grand Lord of the same level in terms of basic attributes. Not good. Wild Aggression is getting serious. When Blue Phoenix saw Wild Aggression walking on the surface of the ocean, her complexion darkened significantly. Immediately, she called Xueqi and said, Guild Leader Black Flame, we need to go help her quickly. Out at sea, Wild Aggression is even scarier than some of Miracle's old monsters. She was well aware that Wild Aggression had obtained a sea-based advanced legacy. When he used his legacy Berserk skill out on the open ocean, he was truly invincible against players of the same level. No need. Just leave it to Aqua, Xueqi replied, shaking his head as he looked at Blue Phoenix's anxious expression. Trying to help Aqua Rose out at sea was simply unnecessary. After all, in a maritime environment, Aqua Rose's combat power was superior to even his own. Moreover, he had given both the Void Robe and Void Gloves dropped by the Void Serpent to her. If it really came down to a battle out at sea against Aqua Rose, even he would have to flee. Right now, her combat power was solidly at Tier 3. Including the effects of the Sea Dragon Staff, a growth-type staff exclusive for Aqua Rose's Sea God's legacy, Her combat power was already at the peak of Tier 3, even without activating a Berserk skill. Hence, for Tier 2 players, picking a fight with Aqua Rose right now was no different from suicide. While Xueqi was saying so, Wild Aggression made his move, firing an arrow straight into the sky. Following which, a twofold magic array appeared overhead and rained countless aqua blue arrows onto Aqua Rose. Tier 2 Taboo Skill, Heavenfall. As for Aqua Rose, she controlled the water serpents to greet these arrows. Boom! When the attacks of both sides clashed, the resulting shockwave formed a depression in the ocean surface and shook the surrounding ships. Meanwhile, when the splashes dissipated, the gigantic water serpents still towered proudly above the ocean surface, their bodies entirely unscathed. Chapter 1929. Sea God's Wrath. She blocked it? Wild Aggression's eyes twitched when he saw the sea serpents unharmed. Before Wild Aggression could shake off his shock, Aqua Rose waved her staff once more and sent a water serpent snapping its jaws at the ranger. However, Wild Aggression reacted to the attack quickly. Just as the water serpent was about to bite down on him, he leaped out of harm's way. The water serpent's gigantic body made its single target attack look like an AoE spell. When it crashed into the ocean surface, the impact created a whirlpool 8 yards in radius and more than 10 meters deep. The power of the serpent's attack had the miracle members present gulping involuntarily. If they were struck by that attack, they would undoubtedly die. Meanwhile, after Wild Aggression dodged the water serpent's attack, he started firing arrow after arrow at Aqua Rose from midair. While this water serpent of yours is good in a melee fight, but it is far from enough to deal with me. As a veteran expert, Wild Aggression quickly understood Aqua Rose's weaknesses after clashing with her for just a short time. While the water serpent was indeed strong, it was considerably slow. All he needed to do to win this fight was avoid the water serpent and focus on attacking Aqua Rose herself. Like shooting stars, the arrows Wild Aggression launched moved so quickly that others could see only streaks of light. For a time, dozens of light blue streaks of light bombarded the water barrier protecting Aqua Rose, raising splashes of water one after another. However, no matter how many arrows struck Aqua Rose's barrier, they got through only the first layer at most. They weren't able to pierce the second layer even in the slightest, much less damage Aqua Rose. The boss still hasn't broken through that barrier even after attacking so many times. She really is a monster. Even if the commander can't harm her, she can't harm the commander, either. With the commander's combat standard and speed, that slow water serpent won't be able to touch even a strand of the commander's hair. The players observing the battle between Wild Aggression and Aqua Rose from a distance were mesmerized. The battle between these two players did not look like a battle between players at all, but more like a territorial struggle between two monsters of equal strength. No matter how many times these two monsters attacked each other, they failed to inflict any harm on one another. One is not enough? Raising her brow at Wild Aggression, Aqua Rose pointed her free hand at the ranger. Immediately, the remaining 11 water serpents all joined in on the attack. How can she control so many serpents? Wild Aggression's expression turned serious when he saw the approaching water serpents. Dealing with one water serpent was easy enough, as its attacks were somewhat monotonous. However, if all 12 water serpents were to attack simultaneously, the standard of the attack would undergo a qualitative transformation. Originally, Wild Aggression had thought that Aqua Rose could control only one water serpent properly. In that case, he could take advantage of the water serpent's slow attack speed to counterattack her. However, with all 12 water serpents attacking him now, he could only evade. He had no opportunity to attack Aqua Rose whatsoever. In the blink of an eye, Wild Aggression was placed in an absolute disadvantage. However, the thing that made him truly fearful was the fact that Aqua Rose's control over the water serpents improved as the battle went on, making it increasingly difficult for him to evade their attacks. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before the serpents devoured him. Fire the warship's cannons and kill her. It doesn't matter even if you destroy the ship she is standing on. Wild Aggression commanded, his eyes becoming bloodshot when he saw his depleting HP. Hearing Wild Aggression's order, the miracle members controlling the giant crocodile warship sprang into action. After they aimed the warship's main cannon at Aqua Rose's position, the cannon started gathering a frightening amount of manage. The shot from the giant crocodile warship's main cannon was the warship's strongest attack. One hit from the main cannon could heavily injure even a Grand Lord-ranked sea monster or instantly obliterate an advanced speedboat. Sensing the dense mana converging on the giant crocodile warship, Aqua Rose immediately grew serious, activating her legacy berserk skill before chanting an incantation. Suddenly, everyone on the battlefield felt strong winds blowing at them. At the same time, gigantic whirlpools formed on the ocean's surface one after another. Over 100 whirlpools appeared in the blink of an eye, swaying every one of Miracle's ships violently. Attack! Wild Aggression shouted hurriedly when he sensed that the situation was amiss. Following the ranger's command, a black-white beam of light shot out from the giant crocodile warship, tearing apart the space around it as it sped to devour Aqua Rose. Go! At the same time as the light beam appeared, Aqua Rose raised her staff into the air. Immediately, the whirlpools erupted and transformed into gigantic waterspouts that moved to intercept the magic beam. Sea God's Wrath. This move was the strongest spell Aqua Rose currently possessed and was a curse that could be used only when she had her legacy berserk skill activated. Suddenly, over 100 waterspouts clashed with the magic beam, the intense shockwave resulting from the clash causing the ocean's surface to sink. The clash between the magic beam and the waterspouts continued for several seconds. Then, the energy reserves for the attack finally ran out. In the next moment, the light beam dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind a bunch of intact waterspouts. How is this possible? Wild Aggression's mind blanked out when he saw the giant crocodile warship's magic beam disappear without achieving anything.
However, before the ranger could snap out of his daze, one of the waterspouts had already devoured him entirely.
The waterspouts then extended their reach toward the distant giant crocodile warship. When the duration of Sea God's Wrath ended, aside from the giant crocodile warship, every one of Miracle's advanced and ordinary speedboats caught within range of the spell was destroyed. This outcome had the Water Ghost Legion members, who were fighting against Blue Phoenix's forces, gaping in shock. One attack had destroyed several dozen speedboats. This attack was even more frightening than any large-scale destruction spell they had seen before. I'm not fighting anymore. That woman's practically a king-class sea monster. I'm not going to die a pointless death here. Let's escape together. Right. Let's escape together. That way, the higher-ups won't be able to pin the blame on us. After a moment of silence, Miracle's members could no longer withstand the pressure they felt from Aqua Rose. Immediately, every one of Miracle's ships turned around and fled the battlefield, further stupefying the Water Ghost Legion members. How were they supposed to leave the battlefield without any ships? They would simply be live targets if they jumped into the ocean. Moreover, swimming in the ocean consumed a lot of stamina. We don't have any other choice but to try it. Realizing their current predicament, some of the Water Ghost Legion members chose to dive into the sea. Although the sea monsters were extremely dangerous, their chances of survival with the sea monsters were much better than if they stayed to fight against the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members, where death would be certain. As for the rest of the Water Ghost Legion members, they desperately tried using instantaneous movement scrolls to teleport onto the fleeing ships. However, Aqua Rose did not give these players any opportunity to escape whatsoever. Her combat power was originally already at the peak of Tier 3. After activating her Berserk skill, she could easily slaughter the Tier 1 and Tier 2 Water Ghost Legion members, needing only one hit per person. After just a short moment, the corpses of nearly 300 Water Ghost Legion members could be seen floating on the ocean. Meanwhile, as Aqua Rose was conducting her massacre, the distant Miracle members vanished without a trace. Even the glacier seal placed on the battlefield had disappeared. The sudden reversal of the battle thoroughly dumbfounded Blue Phoenix's forces. This situation overturned the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion members' understanding of naval combat. They had never thought that one person's strength would be enough to change the outcome of a near-hopeless battle. Moreover, Aqua Rose had even defeated the Water Ghost Legion with relative ease. Only Xueqi found this situation normal. The first reason for this shocking outcome was the extreme weakness of the ships that players currently possessed. While these ships might be useful against low-tiered players, against players at Tier 3 and above, their effects would be negligible. The second reason was Aqua Rose having the Sea God's Legacy, one of the strongest sea-based legacies in the game. In the past, it was precisely because of this legacy that the Freedom Alliance had managed to become an overlord of the seas. Otherwise, with the Freedom Alliance's strength, it would have long since been devoured by the various superpowers. Following which, Xueqi started going through the spoils of war. In the meantime, everyone else rested and prepared to enter Savage God Island. Meanwhile, inside one of the dark canyons on Savage God Island, a 1,000-man legion from Miracle was currently searching for Phoenix Rain's group with everything they had. At this time, 1,000 Miles, the leader of the legion, suddenly received a message from one of the Water Ghost Legion members that had successfully fled the battlefield. "We lost." 1,000 Miles's complexion darkened when he read the message. He simply could not believe it. Chapter 1930. Legacy Treasure. 1,000 Miles's expression sank even further after watching the battle video the Water Ghost Legion member sent him. How is she so powerful? The battle video showed Aqua Rose blocking the giant crocodile warship's main cannon all by herself. Moreover, she had even managed to damage the giant crocodile warship severely, as well as destroy several dozen speedboats. To make matters worse, she had done all these things with only one spell. Even large-scale destruction spells weren't capable of such a feat after all. Every speedboat had a certain amount of magic resistance. They were also made of very tough materials to be able to fight sea monsters. Nevertheless, Aqua Rose still managed to destroy the speedboats in one hit. This proved that her attack dealt additional damage to ships. Vice Guild Leader, did something happen? Silent March, who was currently dressed in a set of gray robes and had an aura of death surrounding her body, asked curiously when she noticed the grim expression on 1,000 Miles's face. Wild's ambush failed. 1,000 Miles replied as he forwarded the message he received to her. Moreover, it was a rout this time. Over 70% of the Water Ghost Legion's members died in battle. Several dozen ordinary and advanced speedboats also got destroyed, and 6 bronze speedboats and 1 mysterious iron speedboat got captured by the enemy. How is that possible? Silent March found 1,000 Miles's words incredible. Could the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion have come prepared this time and mobilized every one of its fleets for this battle? The 5 fleets Wild Aggression led were all expert fleets of Miracle. There was also the Water Ghost Legion. Unless the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion mobilized every one of its fleets, she couldn't imagine how Wild Aggression could suffer such a heavy blow. No. All of this is due to just one person, 1,000 Miles said, shaking his head. One person. Silent March could not help but be stunned. Enviously, 1,000 Miles said, even Wild Aggression with his advanced legacy was no match for her. I suspect that she must have obtained a sea-based peak legacy, as well as weapons and equipment unique to her class. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so powerful. Sea-based legacies were things that the various superpowers were currently scrambling to acquire. When the various superpowers clashed with each other out at sea, the battle would normally be between players only. Ships were mainly used to deal with sea monsters, as they were not as effective against players. Meanwhile, just obtaining a sea-based basic legacy could increase a player's combat power out at sea by at least 50%. As for advanced legacies, the improvements provided were even more exaggerated. Miracle had exhausted a lot of manpower and resources just to obtain one sea-based advanced legacy. However, 1,000 Miles had to admit that the return was worth the losses incurred. After gaining the advanced legacy, Wild Aggression's combat power out at sea was simply frightening. Whether the Ranger was going up against sea monsters or players, his advanced legacy provided significant help. Now that it seemed that Aqua Rose had acquired a sea-based peak legacy, how could 1,000 Miles not feel envious of it? Moreover, watching this battle had also reaffirmed for him the importance of sea-based legacies. Then what should we do now? I'm afraid it won't be long before the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's reinforcements arrive. Once that happens, we'll have a harder time killing Phoenix Rain, Silent March said worriedly. Since reinforcements have already arrived, there's no need for us to waste time here any longer. In any case, we have already obtained the legacy treasure and achieved our initial goal. Have everyone retreat. 1,000 Miles replied, smiling. We'll let Phoenix Rain and Zero Wing have their fun for now. Once we obtain this legacy, the entire Sea of Death will be Miracle's territory. When Blue Phoenix received news about Miracle's ambush on Phoenix Rain, they had already fought a battle with Phoenix Rain's team on Savage God Island. Meanwhile, by the time Blue Phoenix's fleet arrived, the battle had long since ended. Although they did not manage to steal everything from Phoenix Rain's group, they had still obtained the most important legacy treasure. If they had not wanted to obtain the remaining treasures, They wouldn't have bothered wasting time playing cat and mouse on the island with Phoenix Rain. Although the losses they suffered to Zero Wing were indeed unexpected, compared to the legacy treasure, these losses were negligible. Understood. I'll have everyone retreat from the island right away. Silent March started contacting the members scattered across Savage God Island, and had everyone swiftly withdraw from the island. Pavilion Master. Something strange is going on with Miracle's members. They're actually leaving the canyon. A level 57, Tier 2 Ranger using eagle eyes reported when she noticed that the Miracle members searching for them had started pulling out of Savage God Island. They've stopped chasing us? Phoenix Rain, who was currently recovering her stamina beneath a tree, asked curiously. Has Blue arrived? That's not right. With 1,000 Miles' personality, he wouldn't give up so easily. Did something unexpected happen to Miracle's forces? She knew very clearly what kind of strength Blue Phoenix's impromptu fleet possessed. It would be fortunate if Blue Phoenix's fleet could break through Miracle's blockade of Savage God Island. Even after Blue Phoenix's forces grouped up with her team, all they would be able to do was buy time for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's other fleets to arrive. 1,000 Miles should know this as well, so how could he possibly give up on this excellent opportunity to deal her a blow? Pavilion Master, something changed. An assassin hiding at the shore of Savage God Island reported suddenly. Miracle's ships stationed around the island are withdrawing. Miracle even removed the lockdown on the island? Phoenix Rain grew even more curious after hearing this report. Just what is 1,000 Miles planning? It was precisely Miracle's blockade that prevented her team from escaping. Meanwhile, now that it was gone, they could leave at any time. However, Phoenix Rain could not understand why 1,000 Miles would give up on such a good opportunity. Pavilion Master. Another update. Miracle's giant crocodile warship is approaching the island. However, by the looks of it, the warship seems to have sustained heavy damage. 2 of its mainsails are in tatters. Moreover, the fleets following behind the warship seem to have lost a lot of ships. They must have just experienced a great battle. The Miracle members on the island seem to be preparing to board the warship and leave the island, the assassin said, shocked as he eyed the gigantic warship that had anchored close to the beach and the Miracle members approaching the warship. After hearing this assassin's report, Phoenix Rain grew even more confused. She could not make heads or tails of the situation at all. Miracle's giant crocodile warship was no laughing matter. It was much more powerful than even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's warship, akin to a mobile seaborne fortress. Hence, she found it truly hard to imagine that Miracle's prided warship would suffer heavy damage. Moreover, Miracle had even decided to abandon Savage God Island and retreat right after suffering such a humiliation. Everyone, get yourselves ready. We're going to leave the island now. Phoenix Rain decided after giving the matter some more thought. Pavilion Master. Could this be Miracle's trap? Maybe they're pretending to retreat to get us to lower our guard, a female cleric said. With how strange this situation was, they had to be especially careful in their decisions. That shouldn't be the case. That's the giant crocodile warship we're talking about. Miracle doesn't need to damage its prized warship to such an extent just to deal with us. Miracle must have fought some other superpower and ended up eating a loss, Phoenix Rain said, shaking her head. While she had indeed considered the possibility of this being a ploy by Miracle, the likelihood was very low. Warships could not be repaired in ordinary repair yards. It would be utterly foolish for Miracle to damage its core combat power just to deal with her team. A short moment later, Phoenix Rain led the survivors of her team out of the canyon they were hiding in and carefully approached the shore of Savage God Island. Their journey there was incomparably peaceful. They did not encounter a single member of Miracle. Just which superpower started a fight with Miracle? Phoenix Rain could not help but wonder as she thought back to the uneventful journey her team just made. As far as she knew, there were no naval superpowers capable of forcing Miracle to make such a decisive retreat. Pavilion Master, look. It's Blue Phoenix's fleet. A Tier 2 Ranger said as she waved excitedly at the ships approaching the shore they stood on. When Phoenix Rain turned to the direction the female ranger indicated, confusion covered Phoenix Rain's face. It was indeed Blue Phoenix's fleet that arriving. However, Miracle's ships currently surrounded Blue Phoenix's fleet, yet for some reason, none of Miracle's ships dared approach Blue Phoenix's fleet. They only watched the fleet edge up to the shore from afar as if they were afraid of something. When Blue Phoenix's fleet got closer, Phoenix Rain suddenly noticed the presence of sailboats and speedboats that were both unfamiliar yet familiar to her. This was especially true for the sailboat at the lead. Zero Wing.
Phoenix Rain was filled with an indescribable sense of shock when she saw Xueqi and his guild members standing at the bow of the one-horned sailboat.
Could it be their doing? Chapter 1931. Savage God's Treasure. Sea of Death, on the giant crocodile warship off Savage God Island. Vice Guild Leader, the results of our investigation are in. According to our spies, Black Flame is personally leading Zero Wing's team this time. As for why Zero Wing is here, we still aren't certain, Silent March reported as she pointed towards Zero Wing's members, who had just set foot ashore. Black Flame. 1,000 Miles smiled upon hearing this. We're quite lucky this time. Since the guild leader of Zero Wing has personally come to a remote place like the Sea of Death, Zero Wing must be conducting a big operation. Although Zero Wing had ruined his plans, it would seem that he was soon going to earn back his losses. I'll have 5 assassin parties secretly tail them, Silent March said, a smile likewise appearing on her face. She then started arranging for the necessary manpower. In God's domain, guild leaders of large guilds generally wouldn't lead a team of their own. However, when they did, it would definitely be an important operation. If one stalked such a team and properly took advantage of the opportunity, one could deal damage to the targeted guild and steal said guild's harvest. Only, it was very difficult to track the guild leaders of the various large guilds as they would generally take preventive measures to cover their traces. Make sure Zero Wing's members don't detect them, no matter what. 1,000 Miles reminded. Vice Guild Leader, rest assured, the parties I sent are the best. I am certain they will not be discovered. Silent March nodded. Meanwhile, on Savage God Island. After Blue Phoenix informed Phoenix Rain about the battle between Aqua Rose and the Water Ghost Legion, Phoenix Rain could not help but sigh ruefully. She had gone to great lengths to secure a clue leading to a sea-based legacy, yet before she could get the legacy, Miracle stole it from under her. Meanwhile, Zero Wing had somehow obtained a sea-based peak legacy without anyone noticing. With this peak legacy, even the naval overlords would not dare to casually start a war with Zero Wing. Big Sis Rain, does that mean the legacy treasure fell into Miracle's hands? When Blue Phoenix heard about Phoenix Rain's battle on Savage God Island, her originally happy mood instantly vanished. If not for 9 Dragons Emperor leaking information, you wouldn't have met such an ambush. Big Sis Rain, why don't we report this matter to the Great Pavilion Master? If we do so, 9 Dragons Emperor will definitely get his just deserts. The clue regarding the legacy treasure was something they had discovered in the Savage Wildland. Now, however, their efforts had ended up profiting Miracle instead. It's useless. We don't have any evidence. The Great Pavilion Master won't believe a unilateral claim. Not to mention, the competition is already at a crucial point. 9 Dragons Emperor might even be hoping I'll complain to the Great Pavilion Master, to use it to lower my standing, Phoenix Rain said, shaking her head. In the next moment, however, the corners of her lips curled up as she added, however, unfortunately for 9 Dragons Emperor, while it is indeed true that 1,000 Miles has stolen the legacy treasure, our side obtained the Savage God's treasure. The Savage God's treasure? Xueqi, who stood before Phoenix Rain, muttered in surprise. He had never imagined that Savage God Island would really have both the Savage God's legacy and treasure. In the past, he had only heard of these 2 things' existence, nothing more. When no additional information was revealed, many people took the news as fake. After all, both these 2 things were left behind by a god. How could there be absolutely no news about them after players acquired them? That's right. Phoenix Rain smiled. She then retrieved an ancient book from her bag and said, "This is the treasure left behind by the Savage God, a divine tome." The moment Phoenix Rain took out the divine tome, everyone present felt their perception vanish as the large book sucked the ambient mana completely dry. Impossible. A divine tome. Xueqi goggled at the book in Phoenix Rain's hands reflexively, an indescribable sense of shock flooding his heart. Current players would not have any accurate knowledge regarding divine tomes. However, Xueqi, who had played God's Domain for more than a decade, knew just how valuable a divine tome was. It was no exaggeration to say that it was worth more than a fragmented legendary item. Its value to lifestyle players could even rival a legendary item.
This is a treasure that allows lifestyle players to enter the Divine Library and learn the recipes and designs left behind by ancient gods, Phoenix Rain said, chuckling. Although there are only 2 entry slots available, if used properly, generating a fortune is definitely possible. While the Legacy treasure could grant players frightening combat power, the Savage Gods treasure allowed players to gain frightening wealth. After all, those recipes and designs were left behind by ancient gods. The items that could be created using those recipes and designs were undoubtedly amazing. Earning a fortune with those items would be very easy. Meanwhile, money just so happened to be the thing she lacked the most right now. She had invested practically every coin she earned into developing her naval forces. However, despite doing so, her naval forces were still significantly weaker than Miracle's. If she wished to surpass Miracle, then she required more funds. Moreover, while Miracle had indeed stolen the Legacy treasure from her, obtaining the Legacy itself was impossible in the short term. The player Miracle selected for the Legacy would need sufficient strength. Meanwhile, in order to guarantee success, Miracle would definitely have to make a lot of preparations. Guild leader Black Flame, it is all thanks to you that Blue and her forces were able to escape tragedy this time. At the same time, you also saved my life. I hope that you can accept one of these 2 slots, Phoenix Rain said sincerely as she looked at Xueqi. While having allies was a good thing, not all allies would be willing to lend a helping hand during critical moments. Most of them would take action only after weighing their potential gains and losses. The fact that Zero Wing stepped forward when she faced danger was invaluable. Phoenix Pavilion Master, you are making too much of it. I only helped out as an ally. However, I am indeed very interested in this Divine Tome entry slot. While I will be accepting your goodwill, I cannot just take it for free, Xueqi said. He immediately took out 6 bronze speedboats and traded them to Phoenix Rain. Each entry slot to the Divine Library was worth roughly 1 fragmented legendary item. Definitely far more than the help he provided this time. As for the bronze speedboats, these things currently weren't of much use to Zero Wing, as the guild was not particularly active in the Sea of Death right now. However, they were worth a lot to Phoenix Rain, who operated mainly in the Sea of Death. With a look at the trade window, Phoenix Rain understood that, like herself, Xueqi did not like owing favors. Hence, she simply nodded and accepted the 6 bronze speedboats. Using the Divine Tome, Phoenix Rain left a mark on Xueqi's palm. With this, he could either use the mark himself or transfer it to someone else. However, it could be used only once. Once the transaction was completed, Phoenix Rain decided against lingering on Savage God Island, as she still had a lot of work awaiting her. After instructing Blue Phoenix's group to continue guiding Xueqi to Comma Island, Phoenix Rain herself returned to Thunder Island. Xueqi headed deeper into the Sea of Death on the one-horned sailboat. While resting inside a cabin in the sailboat, Xueqi fell into deep thought as he looked at the mark on his palm. In the end, he decided to be the one to use this mark. Although there were other lifestyle masters in the Candlelight trading firm, acquiring a recipe or design from the Divine Library required one to possess sufficient combat power as well. Otherwise, one would not gain anything. Meanwhile, if he waited until Melancholic Smile or Cream Cocoa became combat experts, it would be months or years before he could reap the benefits of the Divine Library. Following which, Xueqi activated the mark on his palm. Suddenly, the mana inside the cabin stirred. Shortly after, a spatial tear appeared behind Xueqi and sucked him into it. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the room, leaving behind only a silver magic array on the floor where he had been standing. Chapter 1932. Divine Library. After getting sucked into the spatial tear, Xueqi arrived in a dark and chaotic space. Standing at the center of this space was a majestic shrine that gave off such pressure that even the chaotic airflow actively avoided it. The moment Xueqi appeared before the shrine, he could feel a stifling suppression of his strength. The frightening divine might the shrine exuded also made his movements extremely sluggish. This pressure really is amazing. It's no wonder they said that players couldn't enter the Divine Library without having a certain degree of strength. Xueqi felt a little surprised as he moved his body tentatively. Right now, his body's physique and basic attributes weren't even at the standard of a Tier 1 player. His perception of his surroundings had also become non-existent. If he were to fight in such a state, he might have difficulty going up against a chieftain of the same level. If any other Tier 2 player were in his position right now, one could easily imagine how much weaker they would become, not to mention lifestyle players. After familiarizing himself with the environment, Xueqi approached the shrine, which was over a kilometer tall. Countless divine runes and magic arrays were engraved into the shrine's exterior, radiating a golden glow that gave the shrine a sacred ambience. Meanwhile, standing before the main entrance was a stalwart statue wearing leather armor and a helmet made out of dragon bones, the helmet exposing only a set of eyes. The statue also held an axe in each hand. The pressure the statue gave off was so powerful that Xueqi had extreme difficulty approaching it. When he got within 100 yards of the statue, his body refused to move even a step closer.
What kind of statue is this?
It's clearly an inanimate object, yet it still has such a powerful pressure. Most likely, even Tier 4 players can't walk up to its feet looking at this 10-meter-tall statue. Xueqi could feel that the pressure it gave off would increase exponentially the closer one got to it. After bypassing the statue, Xueqi quickly arrived at the shrine's main entrance. The entrance was so massive that even monsters over 10 meters tall could walk through it easily. As Xueqi approached the golden set of doors, the doors slowly parted, a blinding glow escaping through the gap between the doors. By the time the golden doors were fully opened and the intense light had dissipated, a sea of books appeared before Xueqi. Rows of bookshelves filled the hall before him with patrol squads of stone guards wandering all around the chamber. Similar to Xueqi, these stone guards were all level 69. As for their ranks, there were elites, special elites, and chieftains. Although the HPs of these stone guards were not as high as that of ordinary monsters of the same rank and level, the elites still had over 1 million HP, while the chieftain rank squad captains had 5 million HP. If Xueqi were to come across these monsters in the outside world, he wouldn't even have paid attention to them. However, in his current state, he had no choice but to take the many stone guards in the hall seriously. The chieftain-ranked stone guards were especially dangerous to him. While Xueqi was carefully observing the movements and habits of the stone guards, an armored middle-aged man, whose body was translucent like a ghost, suddenly appeared at the center of the hall. Even when Xueqi tried using omniscient eyes on him, aside from finding out that the man was named Bernard, he did not get any other information. Adventurer of the human race, I am Bernard, the manager of the Divine Library. Since you have gained an entry slot from a divine tome, you may pick out one book from the Divine Library. However, the books here are not easy to acquire. They will not be given to people who lack ability, Bernard said after appearing before Xueqi. Like an emotionless machine, Bernard continued indifferently, there are a total of 5 floors in the Divine Library, and the higher you go, the fewer the books available. In return, however, their value will also increase. Even ancient gods would covet the books found on the top floors. There are a large number of gods on every floor. Your task will be to obtain the book you want from these guards. Once you get a book, I will send you back immediately. If you are killed by the guards, you will similarly be sent away. If you wish to reap a harvest in the Divine Library, you must not be greedy. Tread within the limit of your abilities. After saying so, Bernard vanished. Sure enough, this place is the same as the rumors made it out to be. Xueqi possessed a certain degree of understanding of the Divine Library, due to its great fame in God's domain. Countless superpowers had fought desperately to acquire a divine tome in the past. Stored inside the Divine Library were various recipes and designs for lifestyle classes. There were even designs for powerful war weapons, defensive constructions, and magic arrays. Just like Bernard had said, even after reaching Tier 6, players would still lust for the Divine Library's contents. In the past, the most famous story involving the Divine Library had a Tier 6 God-ranked player obtaining a design for a war fortress from the Divine Library's 4th floor. The war fortress built using this design could resist even Tier 6 gods. Its deterrent force easily surpassed that of a Tier 6 player. The guild that acquired this war fortress also gained great assistance from it. God's domain had many forbidden lands that were so inhospitable that guild towns couldn't be set up within them no matter what. However, the war fortress could. Due to this reason, countless superpowers had tried desperately to obtain a divine tome so that they could acquire an amazing war fortress design themselves. With such a war fortress, they, too, could develop in the various forbidden regions and reap the bountiful resources and treasures there. Of course, while Xueqi also wished to obtain a war fortress design right now, with his current strength, reaching the 4th floor was utterly impossible. The difficulty of each floor in the Divine Library increased exponentially. A Tier 2 player would be fortunate to obtain a book from the first floor. Even the best among Tier 2 players would get only as far as the second floor. However, although the books on the first and second floor were not as valuable as a war fortress design, they were already precious. Let's try out these guards, Xueqi thought as he looked at the patrolling guards. He then used Phantom Kill and had his doppelganger test the waters. He had not been given a time limit for picking a book. Although his doppelganger was not as strong as his main body, even if it died, he wouldn't lose anything. At most, he would just have to wait a few minutes for the skill's cooldown to end. As Xueqi controlled his doppelganger to approach one of the patrol squads, the guards in the entire hall went into a frenzy, all of them surging toward his doppelganger. Although this situation surprised Xueqi a little, he still managed to have his doppelganger charge forward and cut at one of the squad captains. Pang! Before the doppelganger could even land a hit, however, Xueqi suddenly saw a flash stabbing at his doppelganger's body. The doppelganger went flying, its HP decreasing by 1/9. So strong! Xueqi could not help his surprise as he looked at the squad captain. Not only did the squad captain's attack contain great strength, but the way it moved its spear was absolutely flawless, without any excess action whatsoever. The squad captain's combat standard was already very close to rivaling Refinement Realm experts. All the captain lacked was a little bit of intellect. Before Xueqi's doppelganger could stand up, several squad captains nearby had already arrived before it, their spears stabbing the doppelganger one time after another. Whether it was in terms of speed or strength, the squad captains had the upper hand. Despite activating its life-saving skills, Xueqi's doppelganger still did not last more than 10 seconds before getting killed. It did not even get to touch the first row of bookshelves. Chapter 1933. Book acquired. The first floor's difficulty is already so high? Astonishment flashed across Xueqi's eyes as he watched his doppelganger's body dissipate into nothingness. Although he did not focus on getting his doppelganger to reach the bookshelves and simply had it fight, from the moment the doppelganger attacked the first stone guard until it died, less than 10 seconds had passed in total. If an ordinary Tier 2 expert had attempted the same thing, they most likely would have died an even more miserable death. At this moment, Xueqi felt very fortunate that he had not sent one of the other lifestyle masters of the candlelight trading firm to the Divine Library. Otherwise, this entry slot would have been wasted. After waiting for several minutes, Xueqi summoned his doppelganger again for another experiment. This time, instead of fighting the stone guards, Xueqi had his doppelganger focus on moving as far as possible into the hall. However, when Xueqi's doppelganger was still 30 yards away from the first row of bookshelves, the patrolling guards noticed his doppelganger. By the time the doppelganger was 20 yards away from the bookshelves, more than 30 stone guards had already surrounded it, blocking off its path forward completely. What a rapid response! Xueqi was surprised as he watched the stone guards rushing toward his doppelganger. However, while the movement speed of the stone guards was indeed very fast, the doppelganger was not slow, either. Immediately, Xueqi had his doppelganger use Wind Blade, its movement speed skyrocketing. The doppelganger then skirted the blockade and dashed for the bookshelves. Whenever the stone guards launched an attack at his doppelganger, Xueqi would have the doppelganger deflect the attack using its two swords. While it barely managed with the chieftain's attacks, it had no problem with the elites and special elites attacks. Leveraging this knowledge, Xueqi controlled his doppelganger to surround itself with elites and special elites, using them as shields to hinder the chieftains as much as possible. A short moment later, Xueqi's doppelganger arrived before the first row of bookshelves. The first row of bookshelves contained advanced recipes and designs, all of which came from ancient times, so they could be considered unique in the current god's domain. The sight of these recipes and designs tempted Xueqi greatly. However, he also understood very clearly that the deeper the bookshelves were located, the more valuable the books they held. Hence, he had his doppelganger continue deeper without hesitation. Second row. Third row. The deeper Xueqi traveled into the hall, the more effort he had to expend to get even further. The first reason for this was the continuous increase in the number of stone guards. The second reason was the elites and special elites taking the initiative to give way to allow the chieftain-rank squad captains to attack. After Xueqi expended every skill his doppelganger possessed, the doppelganger ended up dying in the middle of the first floor hall. So that's how it is. It's no wonder so many experts failed to obtain anything from the Divine Library in the past. Xueqi took in a deep breath as he mentally replayed the scenes of his doppelganger's attempt. There were several hundred stone guards on the first-floor hall, including over 50 chieftains. The deeper one traveled into the hall, the more chieftains one would encounter. Moreover, if players took the initiative to attack even one of the stone guards, every stone guard in the hall would swarm over to attack them, making it almost impossible for players to locate a book of their preference. In addition, the combat standard of the chieftain-ranked squad captains bordered on the refinement realm. A Tier 2 refinement realm expert would be fortunate to obtain a book from the first row of bookshelves. Experts that hadn't reached the refinement realm wouldn't even be able to touch the bookshelves. Moreover, players' greed would also play an important role when selecting a book. The further one proceeded into the library, the more valuable the books they would see. Hence, players that visited the Divine Library would definitely try to push themselves to their very limits. However, after they truly reached their limits, they would not have any opportunities to reach for a book on the shelves, as the patrol guards would have already surrounded them. Even if they did still have some energy left to grab a book, it would be nearly impossible to accurately grab a book suited to their own needs. Now that I've already grasped the basic movement patterns of the guards, it's about time I made a move myself. After Xueqi simulated the battle on the first-floor hall in his mind several times, he focused his gaze on the closest patrol squad. If he tried to advance into the hall by sneaking through the gaps between patrol squads, once he got discovered, multiple patrol squads would charge at him and quickly surround him. However, if he were to charge straight at the nearest patrol squad, it would take the other patrol squad some more time to reach him. In other words, for a certain period, he would have to deal with only one patrol squad. He wouldn't have to deal with the encirclement of multiple patrol squads right off the bat, which would, in turn, slow down his advance and allow more patrol squads to gather around him. After Xueqi was done planning, he immediately charged at the nearest patrol squad. Intruder, die! After noticing Xueqi's approach, the 10-man patrol squad quickly moved to surround him. Upon seeing this, Xueqi executed Purgatory Pentaslash without hesitation. In terms of basic attributes, he was significantly superior to his doppelganger. Moreover, unlike his doppelganger, he had the assistance of the 7 Luminaries' Ring's aura of wind to increase his movement speed by a significant margin. After sending 5 elite stone guards flying, Xueqi used Wind Blade and rushed past the squad captain, bolting for the depths of the hall. In the middle section of the hall, more than 10 patrol squads managed to surround Xueqi. Faced with such a situation, even Xueqi felt that he was close to reaching his limits, his HP rapidly decreasing. He immediately activated Heavenly Dragon's power, his strength skyrocketing, then executed Sword's Orbit to send the approaching stone guards flying. The boost in strength allowed Xueqi to advance with great ease. Only after he neared the staircase leading to the second-floor hall did he start feeling some pressure. Currently, dozens of squad captains surrounded him. Even though he had an advantage in strength, the squad captains charged at him without fear. Unlike before, when squad captains only tried to hinder his movements and buy time, they now recklessly traded blow for blow, fully intent on reaping his life at all costs. Hence, even though he had superior strength, advancing still took him a lot of effort. In the end, Xueqi decided to use 9 Dragon Slash against the overwhelming number of attacks. With the help of the 16 Abyssal Blade Phantoms, he finally managed to get through the first floor and reach the second floor. Unlike the first floor, the guards on the second floor did not give Xueqi any time to prepare at all. The moment he appeared on the floor, the guards were already swarming toward him. Meanwhile, the guards on the second floor had clearly received a qualitative improvement, as even the weakest guards were chieftains, while the squad captains were high lords whose combat standard was at the refinement realm. Compared to the guards on the first floor, the guards here also coordinated much better with each other. To make matters worse, even with Heavenly Dragon's power activated, Xueqi was actually inferior to the High Lords in strength. By the time Xueqi arrived at the first row of bookshelves, he already felt himself close to reaching his limits. Right now, he didn't even have any energy to spare for grabbing a book. Sure enough, the second floor isn't a place Tier 2 players can casually visit. Xueqi could not help but reveal a bitter smile when he noticed 3 more patrol squads approaching. It seems I have no choice but to give it my all. He activated Blade Liberation, allowing his strength to skyrocket once more. With the activation of twofold Berserk, his strength rivaled that of the High Lord ranked squad captains. following which, he stabbed the abyssal blade into the ground. Shadows then spread out from the magic weapon. Abyssal curse. All the guards within a 50-yard radius were instantly immobilized. Next, Xueqi activated Phantom Kill and had his doppelganger transform into a black dragon. He then split up with his doppelganger and took independent action. After Xueqi left, the pressure on him decreased visibly. Even after he reached the second floor's middle section, only 6 patrol squads were chasing him. In comparison, the black dragon had attracted the attention of over a dozen patrol squads. Lightning Slash. Shadow Blade. Although he had repelled a few squad captains with his skills, even more squad captains quickly took their place, the High Lords launching attacks at his defensive blind spots. Even though Xueqi perceived the attacks ahead of time, there were simply too many of them. There was a limit to the number of attacks he could deflect. As a result, he steadily incurred damage time after time. When he activated Void Shield, the shield's energy depleted rapidly. 80%, 50%, 20%. Just when his Void Shield was about to shatter, Xueqi gritted his teeth and activated Divine Steps. Immediately, he and his 10 new doppelgangers scattered, dashing in different directions, forcing the patrol squads to split up. By constantly switching positions with his doppelgangers, he managed to advance a considerable distance into the hall. Is this my limit? When Xueqi saw the 20-plus patrol squads charging at him from the hall's rear section, he understood that entering the rear section would be impossible. Moreover, his twofold berserk was about to lapse. Risking getting hit, he dashed for a dark gray bookshelf nearby. Just as he was about to look at the books there, however, an angry bellow entered his ears. Intruder, die! When the squad captains saw Xueqi approaching a bookshelf, they went berserk. Suddenly, over a dozen squad captains raised their spears and hurled their weapons at him. Shill, shill, shill. The spears created sonic booms as they flew at Xueqi. It was evident that the power contained within those spears was already at the Tier 3 standard. Seeing this scene, Xueqi no longer dared to inspect the books. Sensing the lethality of those spears, he grabbed one of the 3 books displayed on the bookshelf. The moment Xueqi took the book off the bookshelf, he disappeared from the hall. As for the dozen or so spears, they harmlessly passed through his former location and crashed into the magic barrier protecting the dark gray bookshelf, the magic barrier trembling slightly from the spear's might. Chapter 1934. Basic Combat Device. Sea of Death. In one of the one-horned sailboat's cabins, the silver magic array carved on the floorboards suddenly lit with a brilliant glow. Xueqi's figure then emerged from the array. That was close. Xueqi looked down at the tome in his hands, ecstatic. He had very nearly lost his life back there. He never thought that the stone guards could go berserk. The power of their spears had undoubtedly been at the Tier 3 standard, and if every one of those dozen or so spears had struck him, he would have died instantly. But despite his near-death experience, he couldn't help but excitedly inspect his new treasure. All of the Divine Library's books were precious treasures. First-rate guilds would even drool over the tomes on the first floor, not to mention those on the subsequent floors. Xueqi tapped to open the tome's attribute panel, and the system displayed its information before him. As expected of the Divine Library, even something like this was on the second floor? The corners of Xueqi's mouth twitched slightly when he saw the tome's name, all flashing in his eyes. The tome he had obtained from the Divine Library was the production design for the basic combat device. The combat device was a special item that was similar to the strengthening device, which was a tool that increased equipment durability. The combat device, however, increased players' combat power. This increase to combat power was extraordinary. Rather than increasing its user's basic attributes, the combat device relied on powerful mana to improve its user's life rating forcibly. The ancient gods had created this magic tool, but since the combat device's production method had been lost to time, players could only find these devices in ancient ruins. Moreover, very few were generally hidden in such locations. The various large guilds in the past had treated the combat devices they had found like their own children. Now that he held the combat device's design, why wouldn't Xueqi be shocked? Even though it was only the basic combat device design, it was still enough to drive the various superpowers crazy. The basic combat device increased players' life ratings at Tier 3 and below by 1 rank. Although the improvement wouldn't boost normal players to the archaic species standard, it was still a formidable improvement, on par with upgrading a lord to High Lord rank. When equipped, players would become boss-like existences among their peers. If an ordinary player equipped the combat device, their strength could rival an expert player of the same level and tier. If ordinary expert players use the device, although they would not be a match for peak experts, they would become slightly stronger than refinement realm experts. The combat device's only downside was that it couldn't be used in dungeons, even regional dungeons. In dungeons, equipping the device would have no effect. Even so, many players still dreamed of using the combat device. A basic combat device had sold for around 200 gold in the past, yet many players had fought over every device available on the market. If I can mass-produce these devices, I won't have to worry about a lack of experts in Zero Wing. Although the basic combat device design required precious materials, the total cost for producing each device was only around 60 gold. Unfortunately, the design required mana stones, which amounted to a large portion of the production cost. Fortunately, obtaining mana stones was no trouble for him since he had a 100% success rate when synthesizing them with the Philosopher's Stone. Zero Wing wasn't far from having as many elite and expert players as a true first-rate guild. Some first-rate guilds even had fewer elites and experts than Zero Wing. Only the range of Zero Wing's influence was inferior to these guilds, but that couldn't be helped since Zero Wing had started in God's domain with nothing. However, if he could mass-produce the combat devices, Zero Wing could expand its influence quickly without worrying about a lack of sufficient manpower to manage the guild's additional territory. Thinking up to this point, Xueqi's desire to obtain Comma Island's Manatite Island grew. Despite Zero Wing's recent developmental achievements, its magic crystal income had seen very little improvement. After all, there was a limit to the magic crystals a single area could produce. If the guild wanted to increase this income significantly, it had to occupy an ore vein that generated magic crystals. Returning his focus to the tome in his hands, Xueqi clicked to learn the basic combat device's production method. Only the player that obtained a book from the Divine Library could learn from it. They could not be traded. Hence, the various large guilds in the past had generally sent lifestyle players to the library since they could only put the books to good use by doing so. However, some guilds had dispatched powerful experts to retrieve the more valuable tomes. Those guilds had then invested a ton of resources in nurturing these expert players in the required subclass required to produce the book's items. Fortunately, Xueqi had gotten quite lucky since the book he had claimed contained a forging design. Had he chosen an engineering design or alchemy recipe, he would have had to invest in developing a new subclass. After learning the production method, Xueqi began to practice the required magic arrays for the combat device while he waited for the one-horned sailboat to reach Comma Island. Time passed quickly. Under Blue Phoenix's lead, Zero Wing's fleet avoided many unnecessary fights with sea monsters. Finally, after more than 10 hours, the fleet arrived before an island enveloped in death energy. Comma Island's twin peaks were intertwined, and from afar, the island resembled some kind of massive howling beast. From time to time, deafening roars rose from the island, echoing in the nearby players' minds. Even from afar, plenty of sea monsters were visible as they explored the island's surroundings. All of these sea monsters were level 60 or higher. Just docking on the island would be challenging. Guild leader Black Flame, we've reached Comma Island. I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave, Blue Phoenix said. She couldn't help her confusion. Her gaze wandered to the island. She didn't understand why Xueqi wanted to visit an island doused in death energy and void of mana, but it wasn't her place to question him. God's domain had many secrets after all, and for all she knew, Xueqi might have come here for some high-ranked quest. Thank you, Xueqi said sincerely. If not for Blue Phoenix's familiarity with the Sea of Death's inner area, Zero Wing's fleet would have seen a lot of trouble on the way to Comma Island. The one-horned sailboat had sustained considerable damage on the way here, even despite avoiding many battles. Without Blue Phoenix's guidance, Zero Wing's fleet might have been annihilated for carelessly entering a danger zone. Once Blue Phoenix and her subordinates had teleported away via return scrolls, Xueqi commanded his fleet to approach the island. Although many sea monsters surrounded Comma Island, Aqua Rose and the fleet's other players who wielded sea-based legacies easily removed the creatures from their path. In less than an hour, Zero Wing's ships docked on Comma Island's shore. After seeing to the necessary preparations, an inexplicable fluctuation in space slammed into Xueqi as he set foot on the island. It had felt as if a sonic boom had radiated throughout the world. Just as suddenly, the sound of a system notification reached Xueqi's ears. God's Domain System Announcement. Players have triggered the new expansion pack, Return of the Survivors. The system will undergo a 24-hour update. Please prepare to log out of the game.